An incredible £20,000 in tax-free cash to play with this summer. What would you spend that on? Well, whilst you're thinking about it, listen to some of our previous winners getting that winning phone call from us.
You're the winner of the Great British Giveaway.
I'm slipping neck. Oh dear.
Oh my God, are you joking?
Do you know what? I've never won anything like this in my life.
Oh my God, this is amazing. Thank you.
Hurry, as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News. The People's
Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Nana Acquia. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark Dolan, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Ellie Costello, and thank you so much for joining us here on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Wednesday, the 29th of May. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
The Prime Minister vows to shut down Mickey Mouse degrees if he's re-elected. He says the move will help fund more apprenticeships. But should the government be deciding what students study?
We'll sort out the crisis in the NHS, a claim from Labour which says that nearly 150,000 people died last year on waiting lists. This comes on the day junior doctors declare a fresh 5-day strike just in time for the election.
But the Labour leader faces harsh questions over the party's underhand treatment of veteran MP Diane Abbott. She was suspended over allegations of anti-Semitism.
And there were violent clashes between pro-Palestinian demonstrators and police on Whitehall last night. Dozens were arrested and 3 officers injured.
Now, it's a huge day of news today, and we're very keen for your views on all of these stories, perhaps most particularly the breaking news in the last few minutes, that there'll be a strike in the week leading up to the general election. How very convenient.
It is rather convenient, and this all comes on the day that the Labour Party are pushing the narrative that they are the ones to save the NHS. So, go figure. Is this about politics rather than the benefit of junior doctors necessarily? What do you think?
And yet, they'll be hoping that some people think that, well, if the unions hate the Tories and they're the funders of the Labour Party, they're in with Labour, well, maybe there'll be fewer strikes under Labour.
I guess the question is, do you think it's right that the BMA announce a strike action right before the general election and also on the day that a political party is presenting its plans for the NHS. It does look like it's about politics, but perhaps you disagree and you think this is their only choice to put the pressure on in time for the general election.
But it raises questions about what is legitimate pressure to be using during democratic events. Some countries, of course, ban, for example, opinion polls during an election period. Others will have
too many.
Others have different restrictions. But it does beg the question. Of course, we're very limited about what we can say on television during an election period. But why on earth, then, are some arguably political actors doing other political things that you might expect be more restricted during an election period?
Although the union does say that it will continue strike action regardless who's in number 10 after the general election. But make of it what you will. Get your views in, gbnews.com/your say. But let's get your headlines with Tatiana.
Emily, thank you very much and good afternoon. The top stories from the GB newsroom. Veteran MP Diane Abbott says she's dismayed by reports suggesting that she's been barred from running as a Labour candidate at the general election. She had the whip withdrawn in April last year after she suggested Jewish, Irish and Traveller people experienced prejudice, but not racism. She later apologised and withdrew those remarks, and an investigation concluded in December. But the Labour leader says the party's internal process took longer to resolve. Scotland's First Minister John Swinney says her treatment by the Labour Party has been unfair. She was a close ally of former leader Jeremy Corbyn and served as his shadow Home Secretary. It's unclear whether she'll contest her seat in Hackney North and Stoke Newington. But she says she will be campaigning for a Labour victory. Junior doctors in England will strike for 5 days next month, starting on the 27th of June as part of their ongoing dispute over pay. The British Medical Association says they've made a clear case to the government that further strikes would take place unless a credible pay offer was received. The union has asked for a 35% increase to make up for what it says is 15 years of below-inflation pay. Well, the Health Secretary Victoria Atkins says that announcing this during an election and on Labour's Health Day shows this was only ever political and not about patients or staff. Meanwhile, the head of the Royal College of Nursing is stepping down to launch a bid to become an MP in the general election. Pat Cullen led nurses into unprecedented strike action and says standing down is the hardest decision to make. It's understood she'll run for a seat with the Sinn Féin party. The owners of Royal Mail have agreed to a £3.5 billion takeover bid by Czech billionaire Daniel Kretinsky. The deal will see universal service obligations continue, including one price goes anywhere and first-class post 6 days a week. The company's branding will also remain, as will its UK headquarters. The sale has attracted heavy scrutiny from senior politicians and unions. Business Secretary Kemi Badenoch has underlined the need to protect postal services in remote areas, while Labour says Royal Mail's place in public life must be protected. Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer will go head-to-head in the first televised leaders' debate of the general election campaign next week on the 4th of June. The Prime Minister was aboard an overnight sleeper train to Cornwall last night, unveiling a plan to create 100,000 new apprenticeships. Mr Sunak says Britain will benefit from more skilled workers, which will be achieved by clamping down on the worst-performing university degrees. Labour says apprenticeship achievements among those under the age of 19 have dropped by 50% since 2016. But Mr Sunak says that while university is good for some people, it's not the only option.
Not someone who believes that you have to go to university, and all the apprentices I've been talking to this morning are proof of that, describing it as the best decision they ever made. And what we do know is that there are university degrees that are letting young people down. Independent studies say that around 1 in 5 people who are on degrees would have been financially better off not doing them. About 1 in 3 graduates are on non-graduate jobs. So actually, we are better off providing those young people with the opportunity of a high-quality apprenticeship. The regulator will be given the powers to look at underperforming degrees, looking at the progression rates, the dropout rates, the earnings of people on those degrees, and instead we will use that money to fund 100,000 new apprenticeships.
NHS waiting list targets would be met within 5 years of a Labour government. That's according to a pledge by Sir Keir Starmer. Waits of more than 18 weeks would be eradicated with an additional 40,000 appointments, scans and operations in England each week during evenings and weekends. The Tories called it more copy and paste politics and pointed to its plan to invest in NHS technology. But Sir Keir Starmer says Labour's plan will help health workers get on with the job.
First things that we do, and not the only thing that we do for the NHS, but just the first thing, which is to have 40,000 extra appointments and operations every week. So that means using operating theatres in the evenings, on the weekends, so 40,000. We'll pay for that by getting rid of the non-dom status completely. That's the special tax status for the super rich. That means they don't pay their tax in this country. I think if you live here, you should be paying your tax here, so we'll get rid of that. We also want to get in the money that isn't being paid in tax by those that are avoiding it.
And the Liberal Democrats are pledging an extra £1 billion to champion British farming. Sir Ed Davey has outlined a plan to undo what he calls a legacy of failure by the Conservative government. He's promising to renegotiate overseas trade deals and address a chronic shortage of workers. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Tom and Emily.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 8 minutes past 12. Now, where are we today? Well, Labour is claiming that almost 150,000 people died last year on NHS waiting lists. But the party faces harsh questions over its treatment of veteran MP Diane Abbott.
Yes, and this as ex-leader Jeremy Corbyn prepares to launch his campaign as an independent tonight.
And the Liberal Democrats are back on their battle bus, this time launching what they describe as a rescue plan for farmers in Wales.
And as for the Reform Party, they're preparing to legally challenge what they call Labour's discriminatory tax raid on private schools.
But first,
Rishi Sunak, he's in Cornwall, pushing his party's plan to create 100,000 more apprenticeships by shutting down so-called Mickey Mouse degrees.
This law would give England's universities watchdog new powers to shut down courses that it deemed as underperforming.
Yes, Shadow Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson says it's laughable that the Tories, who've presided over a halving of apprenticeships for young people, are now announcing this.
Meanwhile, the Liberal Democrats say the plans won't work as apprenticeship pay will remain low.
So, GB News political editor Christopher Hope is on the campaign trail with Rishi Sunak today in Cornwall. This is a bold pledge. I know the government have been working on this for a little while. What exactly are they saying about which courses might be shut down?
Emily, what a great question. And hi, Tom. Yeah, we're flying through the windy roads of Cornwall on the way to a broadband provider. The big focus here for the Prime Minister and his team is apprentices, trying to encourage more people to jump off these, what they call Mickey Mouse degrees, Mickey Mouse courses, and move into apprenticeships. The government says that, they can get 1 in 8 university places can be closed by new powers to be given to the Office for Students, and that would free up 100,000 new apprentices, costing costing £900 million. You ask which ones, though, and that is the question that no one appears to want to ask. The PM was asked here in Penzance earlier, name a course you want to shut down, Prime Minister. He wouldn't name one. That's a job for the Office for Students to look through the quality of the course, dropout rates, and what kind of jobs people get from them. So, and indeed, Labour will be asking, after 14 years, this surely is a problem of the government's own making. Why have they allowed this to happen? Why have they not prioritised apprenticeships earlier than now?
Of course, all in the context of soaring numbers of people attending university. There was that big target introduced by Tony Blair of half the country going to university. It seems that the government has sort of been walking away from that a little bit in recent years.
That's right. The boom was definitely under Tony Blair. They felt that the university was the answer. The problem is, since then, we of course have seen spiralling student debt. So you have many young people on courses which don't deliver the income they need to pay off that debt properly, and the government's trying to do something about it. They want to be more kind of proactive about getting actual apprenticeships which can lead to a proper job, almost vocational. The government, though, the number 10 and the team here are keen to talk about doctors' strikes. We heard in the news bulletins just then how there'll be a doctor strike by junior doctors in the long-running dispute over pay in the run-up to polling day on July the 4th. That's given an opportunity for the Tory party, the Tory government, to attack the unions here. We've got a statement here from Victoria Atkins, who's the Health Secretary. She says that she's in politics to help patients, not trade unions. And they say it's for Labour Party to condemn these strikes. Announcing this during an election campaign, they say, and on Labour's Health Day, shows there's only ever a political issue and not one of patients and staff. And there is a point there that we have got West Streeting, Keir Starmer, the Shadow Health Secretary, the Labour leader, out and about saying how they would bring down Labour waiting times in NHS, and the timing does look as though that allows the Tories to say there's a degree of support for both.
Yes, and I'm sure the Labour Party will say that this is a symptom of Tory rule or Tory mismanagement of the NHS. But, Christopher, a row seems to be brewing within the Labour Party over the treatment of the veteran MP, Diane Abbott.
Yes, that's right. Of course, she's been allowed to be an MP for 2 days only, because, of course, all MPs stop being MPs tomorrow with the dissolution of Parliament, but she's not allowed to stand in the general election. She's not a candidate, and she won't be allowed to stand, and that has upset her. She's put out a statement on her Twitter page on X. She's delighted to have the Labour whip restored. She's back in as a member of the Parliamentary Labour Party, and she will be campaigning for Labour victory, so not with her friend Jeremy Corbyn, of course, an independent candidate in Islington North. But she's very dismayed, she says, that numerous reports suggest she's been barred as a candidate. I think, the Labour would say that this makes them look strong dealing with the Labour left, but it may store up problems in the future. This could become a cause célèbre. The treatment of Diane Abbott, one of the first black MP for 80 years and elected in the late 80s. She is totemic for many in the Labour movement, and some would say this is quite harsh treatment of her.
Quite harsh treatment of her, no doubt, although others will, of course, point out that she has been on the rather more radical end of Labour politics. But Christopher Hope, thank you very much for joining us live from the battle bus.
Well, and that her letter was thoroughly offensive to a lot of Jewish people.
Yeah.
But is Rishi Sunak right to be cracking down on these rip-off degrees? Professor James Tooley is the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Buckingham. Thank you very much indeed, Professor, for joining us. I was just looking at some of these degrees that the Telegraph actually has been calling Mickey Mouse degrees. And what I found is that some of them have absolutely shocking potential salaries, potential earnings. Sort of 5 years after doing your degree, you'll still be on a sort of £24,000 salary as an average. I mean, are these the sorts of degrees that the Prime Minister should be going after?
Yeah, he talks about Mickey Mouse degrees, doesn't he? And I don't know why everyone's so down on poor Mickey Mouse. Mickey Mouse is 52 billion sales. So chances are great that we could do Mickey Mouse degrees. But the serious point is there, isn't it? And you're right. So the Telegraph came out with degrees like English literature, for example. That was one of the degrees that people were only earning £26,000 after 5 years. And I sympathise with what the government's trying to do, but it's doing the wrong method here. Yes, we want to ensure that when students go to university, they're going to, with open eyes, to do something that will lead to what they want. But money isn't everything. There are non-pecuniary benefits of education. There's the love of learning for its own sake. Some of those people doing English literature may be very fulfilled doing that, forgetting the earnings that are not as high as if you're doing computing or business or medicine. So that's the first point. Don't say that we've got to decide. Don't say the Office for Students has got to decide. Don't say the government has got to decide backing winners in terms of degrees. Let the people do it. Let students do it. And let's have the myriad of market decisions leading to the right courses. Do you know what's happening already? I mean, in many universities, they're looking at courses which are not attracting students, and they're saying, OK, get rid of those courses. I do it every day is my role as Vice-Chancellor. So I think the government is onto the right idea here, using the wrong methods.
Isn't the problem here that we spend quite a lot of time subsidising courses and we don't sort of match these courses to what real-world outcomes would look like? To some extent, you could make a case that Mickey Mouse degree courses help subsidise these STEM subjects and nuclear research and all the rest of it. It's very cheap to learn about Mickey Mouse. It's quite more expensive to do a lot of experiments in the lab. So everyone paying for these courses perhaps is subsidising the other guys.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said for that, absolutely. The key thing here is the government keeps throwing money at universities, not the University of Buckingham, incidentally. We eschew government funding, but it keeps throwing money, and there's mixed messages coming on. So you can do a Mickey Mouse degree, and you can get your loan, your living support, the same as anyone else, and the university gets money to help you do that. That shouldn't be the way that it happens. You should have the students deciding, the student loan system working, so the government's not subsidising. I mean, when you and I get a mortgage or a bank loan, we don't assume that the government's going to subsidise us. This should be a proper loan system, which leads to proper results. And incidentally, I am very much in favour of the apprenticeships. We're expanding our apprenticeships here. But of course, the danger there, of course, is employers claim back from their apprenticeship levy and so on, and you could end up getting Mickey Mouse apprenticeships.
Well, yes, that is an issue too. And also, I think this shouldn't be just about subsidising other students. I mean, it should be about students making the right decisions for them and getting all the information that actually, if they do this English literature course at X university, they won't be earning very much money, probably. And I think that's very important. It's about the students themselves not being sold a lie. Thank you very much, Professor James Tooley, Vice-Chancellor of the University of Buckingham.
Now, some breaking news, and hold on to your seats for this one. The veteran Labour Member of Parliament, Diane Abbott, has not been barred from standing in the general election. That's according to Keir Starmer. He was speaking in Worcester earlier today and said to journalists assembled there that no decision has been made on Diane Abbott standing or otherwise. So we've gone from a case where she was suspended, then given back the whip, then told that she wasn't allowed to stand, and now we're being told that she's not been told that she's not allowed to stand, but that no decision has been made. Are you keeping up?
What an utter communications mess. Yes, political editor at the HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield, joins us now to make sense of this. Kevin, sorry to get you just when the breaking news has landed, but your reaction to that Keir Starmer has now said, no, she hasn't been banned from standing.
Yeah, well, I'll try my best to try and clear it up. I mean, it is all very confusing. You're right. I mean, so last night, the Times broke the story around about 7 p.m. that Diane Abbott would not be allowed to stand. Now, I went to a senior party source about this. Now, they said to me that she'd had the whip restored, but no decision, as Keir Starmer has just said, but no decision has been taken on whether or not she can stand. Now, I went to a separate, very reliable source and I said, look, is it true that she's not been allowed to stand? And that person said, yes, that is the case. So I followed up the story, wrote it that she would not be standing, and you'll know yourselves, if a story's wrong, the parties are normally very quickly on the blower to let you know that you're got the wrong end of the stick. But no phone call was forthcoming. Nothing has been denied. The Times story last night wasn't denied either. So Labour have, at the very least, allowed this story to run for the last 12 to 18 hours. And now we're in this strange position. Whereas Diane Abbott was even saying this morning that it was her understanding that she'd been barred from standing as well. And now Keir Starmer seems to be U-turning on that. So it is all a bit confusing. The final decision, I think, will ultimately be taken by Labour's ruling National Executive Council. It may well be that, such as the backlash against the decision, the apparent decision not to let her stand, that Labour are having a rethink, and she may well end up being the candidate after all, which would be a remarkable turn of events, given that, a couple of days ago she wasn't even a member of the Labour Parliamentary Party.
It would be a remarkable turn of events, although perhaps they're just hoping that it all goes away and that the deadlines pass and that nothing happens. That seems to what has been going on for the last 5 or 6 months. Because, Kevin, the context of this, of course, is that this investigation into Diane Abbott, which was started more than a year ago, seems to have ended about half a year ago with her taking some sort of online course in how not to be an anti-Semite. But it's very curious, therefore, that Keir Starmer just last Friday said that the process was still ongoing.
You're right, it is a very odd situation indeed. Yeah, you're right. Again, Labour didn't deny the report that this investigation was concluded, I think, round about Christmas time. Now, I think some sort of arrangement was proposed in the background that Diane Abbott would be allowed to have the whip back, but then would announce that she was retiring as an MP, therefore, to avoid the unpleasantness of being dumped as a Labour candidate. Whatever has happened, though, that arrangement, for whatever reason, has broken down, and now it's a case of whether she will be allowed to stand or not. So yeah, Keir Starmer definitely has questions to answer, because you're right. Up until very recently, he was still saying that the investigation was ongoing, and he couldn't comment on it. Whereas now it would appear that the investigation ended some months ago. So yeah, lots of unanswered questions, and this is something that's going to dog Keir Starmer and the Labour Party officials for a while now, I think, until it is cleared up, and it's completely overshadowing what is meant to be Labour's day for stating what they would do on the NHS, were they to win the election.
Let's not forget, Kevin, how this all kicked off. I mean, essentially, she wrote this letter to The Observer, and many saw it as her saying that essentially racism against Jewish people does not exist, and it was found to be thoroughly offensive. And people from across society all were absolutely outraged by her comments. Is Keir Starmer doing the right thing here? He wants to set out very strongly that the Labour Party is not for anyone who downplays anti-Semitism.
Well, that's exactly why this has dragged on for as long as it has. I mean, even Diane Abbott herself admitted very quickly that she'd got it wrong, that it was an offensive letter that she wrote to The Observer, effectively comparing discrimination against Jewish people with discrimination against people with red hair. So clearly that was extremely offensive to Jewish people. She apologised for it.
But Kevin, I think this is where people sort of struggle to follow, because, of course, Diane Abbott did apologise. In her initial apologies, he said, oh, we sent an early draft instead of... I don't know quite how it was an early draft, because the whole point of it was saying that you can't be racist against Jews because they're not black. I mean, that was basically the whole ethos of the letter. How do you send an early draft that's quite so different? But that feeds into what is perhaps a deeper problem here, and this gets to the nub of perhaps how the next government might work or otherwise. The constant mistruth, communication, spin and sleaze. And this almost harks back to a bit of the early days of Tony Blair. We just keep getting told things that later turn out not to be true. This investigation was over. It wasn't. Diane Abbott has been barred from standing. Oh, no decision has been making, but she might not stand, but she was going to retire with dignity, but we were kicking her out. Which is it? In all of these issues, we're seeing perhaps what is an almighty mess at the core of the Labour operation, or back to those dark old days of spin.
Well, the thing is, Labour knew, I think, that at some point in the campaign things would get a little bit sticky for them. Obviously, the Conservatives haven't had a great start to the campaign. It's been OK for Labour thus far. They haven't really committed any major gaffes. But this is a real crunch point for them. How they deal with this, how they clear up these very justifiable questions will tell us a lot, I think, about how the rest of the campaign will go, and indeed how they will govern were they to win the general election. So, yeah, this has been handled extremely badly. There's absolutely no two ways about it, and it's not going to go away, certainly not based on what Keir Starmer has had to say just a few moments ago. I think that just throws up even more questions, and until we get clear answers to those questions, then it's going to overshadow every other message that Labour are trying to convey as the campaign continues.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much for joining us with that breaking news. Kevin Schofield, political editor at the HuffPost UK. We'll be coming back to this because there's a lot of questions to answer.
Huge questions.
Communication shambles, one might say. But in other news, 3 police officers were injured and 40 people were arrested during a pro-Palestinian demonstration in Westminster last night.
Yes, the protest organised by the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, amid other groups, began in Whitehall at 6 o'clock. It was due to end 2 hours later, but as often happens at these events, some protesters ignored the disperse order and things degenerated. Indeed, 40 people were later arrested by police officers.
Well, joining us now is Norman Brennan, former London police officer and director of Law and Order Foundation. Norman, thank you very much. What do you take from what happened last night?
Well, I'll tell you, I'll start off from the beginning. Enough's enough. What I take from it is that there were about 10,000 demonstrators on the streets of London on a Tuesday evening. Hundreds and hundreds of police officers had their leave cancelled. They were drawn in from all over London. And although the 10,000 were relatively noisy, a bit disorderly, they weren't really many attacks on the police. However, when most went home, there was a hardcore group of about 500, 40 of whom were arrested, and 3 police officers were injured. One was seriously injured. A young female had a bottle thrown at her, hit her in the face, and she was hospitalised. I've seen the photographs of her. They're not very nice at all. They're not pleasant. And the dental treatment alone will cost £2,500 to £3,000 to repair. And these police officers were standing there without their public order gear. They didn't provoke or antagonise these groups. But sadly, there's a hardcore that have got nothing but contempt for anyone and everyone. Their violence has become out of order, and it's always the police that are the brunt of this. So enough is enough. The time has come for the Met Police, the Mayor, the Home Secretary to ban these marches and allow thousands of police officers that are taken away from already depleted areas to go back to their divisions and police the streets rather than having their leave cancelled. And every weekend is the same. And I think the police, the public, everyone has had enough of it. Enough's enough.
And yet it must be said that for the first 2 hours of this protest, it was peaceful. There were the majority of people there going to exercise a democratic right to express their strong-held view. Although within that group, there is a significant chunk of people who clearly turned up to cause trouble, to ignore dispersal orders, to ignore the lawful way of doing protest. How do we separate those two issues? Because there are plenty of people who are very upstanding, law-abiding members of society who just want to attend a lawful march. And how do we separate that from those that turn up to antagonise and cause trouble?
It's very difficult, really, Tom. I mean, let's be honest about it. These demonstrators, if we've got a concern, we're absolutely right. You can take to the streets to voice your concerns. But let's actually look at the transfer side. What about the law-abiding public? What about victims of crime throughout the whole of London? Already, there are already so few police officers there to protect them, reassure them, and investigate in their crimes. And every week, coach loads of police officers are being taken from these already depleted divisions and put on the streets of London. And what can you do? Well, what you can do is say, you've said your piece. The violence is unacceptable. The time has come for you now to go home, stay at home. What you're doing now, some of you, is you're committing gratuitous violence. You're damaging property. You're abusing and assaulting police officers. That is absolutely unacceptable. You've gone beyond the mark that's acceptable. We're banning these marches now for all of those reasons. And the public and the victims of crime rightly have a right to see police officers on their streets and be reassured and have their crimes investigated. And sadly, every weekend they're not. And now this is even happening.
I guess one of the problems, Norman, one of the problems with that is that, as we've seen, a number of civil liberties groups try to take the Home Office to court, and sometimes they win over clampdowns on protests. But Norman, you mentioned at the top that a female police officer has serious facial injuries as a result. Can you just tell us, do you know anything about her condition? Is she going to be okay?
Well, she was in hospital when I last heard. I had a photograph from one of her colleagues sent to me this morning, and it's horrible. She's a young female. She's a lovely-looking young girl that just put on a uniform, went on duty to keep the peace, to stand between good and bad and right and wrong, and a bottle hit her in the face. Her teeth are damaged now. Now, none of us like our teeth or our faces being disfigured. Police officers don't go to work to be abused, assaulted, insulted, and gratuitously grievous bodily harm by cowards in a crowd that think it's okay to throw a bottle at police officers who didn't have public order gear on. They weren't there to antagonise this group. So, yes, I think she's going to be okay, but it's a huge bill, almost £3,000 to pay for her dental repair alone. Her lips are cut, her face is bruised, and she's feeling very low today. And I can understand that. Police officers are not paid for this. It's not part of their job. And I think that should be taken into consideration by the Commissioner and the Mayor of London on future demonstrations. Police officers are not there to be abused. They're there to keep the peace.
Well, we wish her well. Thank you very much indeed, Norman Brennan, former London police officer and the director of the Law and Order Foundation. I do wonder if some of this is why so many police officers only do a few years, if that, before they give up on as a career.
Yeah, no, do get in touch if this resonates with you. I think we'd like to send all of our best wishes to that young police officer from all of us here at GB News. But coming up, the Lib Dems are launching their general election campaign in Wales, launching what they're calling a rescue plan for farmers. But farming in Wales is a devolved issue, the responsibility of the Welsh Labour government.
We'll also get some more on that shock news about Diane Abbott not barred from standing for election.
Not yet, anyway.
That's your headlines.
Tom, Emily, thank you very much. The top stories this hour. As you've just been hearing, Labour has not taken any decision to bar Diane Abbott from standing for the Labour Party at the general election. The MP reportedly told media that she'd been blocked from running with the party, but Keir Starmer said just moments ago the reports were not true. She had the whip withdrawn in April last year following comments she made about racism. She later apologised and an investigation concluded in December. She was a close ally of former leader Jeremy Corbyn and served as his shadow Home Secretary. It's unclear whether she'll contest her seat in Hackney North and Stoke Newington. The Health Secretary is calling on the Labour Party to condemn strikes by junior doctors. It's after the BMA confirmed another 5-day walkout starting on the 27th of June. Victoria Atkins says that announcing the strike during an election proves that it's a political move and not about patients or staff. But the union says its demand for a 35% increase is only to make up for what it says is 15 years of below-inflation pay. The owners of Royal Mail have agreed to a £3.5 billion takeover by Czech billionaire Daniel Kretinsky. The deal will see universal service obligations continuing, including one price goes anywhere and first-class post 6 days a week. The company's branding will also remain, as will its UK headquarters. The sale has attracted heavy scrutiny from senior politicians and unions. Some breaking news just in. Welsh First Minister Vaughan Gething will face a motion of no confidence tabled by the Welsh Conservatives on the 5th of June. That just in. More on this developing breaking story as we get it. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
the latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. On the M62 in West Yorkshire, there's a lane closed westbound where someone's broken down between junctions 28 and 27 from Tingley to Gilderson. It's slowed towards and past there. In Greater Manchester, the A664 is closed each way between Blakely and Harperhay after an accident. On Merseyside, Moorgate Road South is closed off junction 4 of the M57 between Knowsley and Kirby after an accident. In Shropshire, the A41 is closed each way between Weston Heath and Bloomsbury for an investigation. On the M25 in Hertfordshire, the inside lane's closed clockwise at junction 22 near St Albans after an accident. Roughly 3 miles of queues towards there. In Kent on the A2, the westbound exit to the M25 is partly blocked where a lorry's broken down with queues from the Bluewater interchange at Bean. And on the M25 in Surrey, there's a lane closed anti-clockwise where a car's broken down just after junction 11 at Chertsey, causing delays. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
2,000 football banning orders have been issued to England fans ahead of this summer's Euro 2024 tournament in Germany. But authorities think that more than 300,000 England supporters could go to Germany, with Scotland fans, of course, also expected to travel in huge numbers. Well, I'm joined now by GB News' home and security editor, Mark White. Mark, welcome to the show. So you went to a press briefing this morning. As I understand, the authorities are gearing up to tackle what they see as a huge wave of potential hooliganism at the tournament. What's the latest?
Well, they're certainly not saying they're expecting hooliganism, and they are preparing for the worst, of course, if it happens, but hoping for the best. They say that in recent tournaments, England fans and, of course, Scotland fans have been pretty well behaved, but there will be very significant numbers attending that tournament, which gets underway in just over 5 weeks' time. That first match is Scotland taking on Germany in Munich, and of course just 2 days later it's England against Serbia near Dortmund. So 300,000 England fans alone they're expecting, because it's so accessible. I spoke earlier to Chief Constable Mark Roberts, who is the national lead for football policing. This is what he told me.
Positive, you know, England fans got a great record at recent tournaments. We know when any number of that people travel, there's always potential for issues, but I think the German authorities are really well prepared. And I think one of the positives, particularly thinking about our fans, Germany's a beer drinking culture, so the police are well aware of dealing with people in the nighttime economy. They deal with plenty of big festivals, so I think we're going to a place that is well suited to work with us to keep everyone safe and make sure there's no issues.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 38 minutes past midday. Now, the Liberal Democrats, they're also in this election. They've launched their campaign in Wales today, promising that they're going to reverse what they're calling the Conservatives' legacy of failure. There's Ed Davey riding a bicycle in a rather haphazard way. You know,
he has such a lovely time, doesn't he, on the election trail?
They love their election stunts.
Yes, I mean, it was Rishi Sunak getting on a sleeper train to Penzance this morning, and I've been on that sleeper train, and it is... I didn't get a bed, because they were all sold out, so an upright seat for, what, 11 hours?
Ooh.
I think.
Goodness me.
Anyway, although I was going all the way to Aberdeen, pardon?
Couldn't just bunk with someone?
No.
No.
Anyway, Sir Ed Davey has set out a rescue plan for farmers, including £1 billion in extra funding for the agriculture budget, renegotiating botched overseas trade deals, he says, and addressing worker shortages in the sector.
Let's get the very latest from the Lib Dem campaign battle bus. It's called Yellowhammer 1, and Olivia Utley, our political correspondent, is there on it for us. Olivia, another big day in the campaign and more stunts from the Liberal Democrats.
Oh,
we're struggling getting some signal with you, Olivia. We're going to try and persevere, and we might not be able to do this.
I think
but we're going to try and re-establish.
Yes, I can hear you now.
Ah, yes.
Oh, you've got us. Take it away, Olivia. Whatever you want to say.
Got you. OK, well, I am on the Lib Dem battle bus, as you said. I'm in about Worcester at the moment, I think, going over from Wales, where we were this morning, to Somerset in the West Country, one of those Lib Dem former heartlands which were lost in the 2015 general election. Now, in the Wales campaign this morning, the Liberal Democrats are desperately trying to win back at least one seat. They used to hold a seat in Wales, Brecon and Radnorshire, where I was this morning. They held it in 2019, they got it in a by-election, and then they lost it 3 months later in the general election. They're hoping to win that back, in part with a plan for investment in Welsh farmers. Now, that's a bit of a tricky issue for a UK politician to be talking about, because, of course, agriculture is a devolved issue in Wales. The Lib Dems are also promising big to rural communities, both in England and in Wales. There's a lot of focus on pollution in lakes and rivers. That's why we were in Windermere yesterday with those very memorable shots of Ed Davey falling off a paddleboard. And there is also a lot of talk, something which we've heard from Ed Davey in Parliament over the last 4 years, about the dentist drought, an issue which particularly concerns rural communities, both in England and in Wales. The campaign generally, the Lib Dem campaign generally, is very much focused on winning specific seats, mainly from the Conservatives and also from the SNP in Scotland. There is no plan this time for the Liberal Democrats to sort of win the general election. That's what, in 2019, Jo Swinson, the former leader of the party, said that she would be the next Prime Minister. Ed Davey is very much not saying that this time round. They just plan to get 40, maybe 50 seats from Conservative MPs, perhaps even some cabinet ministers in the south of England. Ed Davey is very careful not to criticise Keir Starmer. He is hoping that at some point the polls in this election will narrow to the point where we could be looking at a hung parliament and potentially the Lib Dems becoming kingmakers. He is very happy, though, to throw all sorts of mud at the Conservatives. We were talking to him earlier today, and here's what he had to say.
No, we're really clear that taxes are not going to go up for people. The Conservatives have put them up so much to record levels in a cost of living crisis. The Conservatives are now the high tax party in the UK, and that's a scandal. When we publish our costs manifesto, we'll show where the money will come from for policies like our £1 billion a year extra for farmers who've been betrayed by the Conservatives. And, for example, we've been making it clear that the cuts in taxes to the big banks really need to be reversed. And the Conservatives have favoured the big banks by £4 billion a year in tax cuts. That's not right when people are struggling with Conservative higher taxes.
Well, a lot of talk there, as you heard, about Tory failures, Tories letting down Welsh farmers. Ed Davey seems to have learnt from his predecessor, Nick Clegg, and ruled out a coalition with the Conservative. He hasn't, though, ruled out a coalition with Labour, and perhaps that's something we should be keeping an eye on if we do end up in a situation where the polls narrow to the point of a talk about a hung parliament.
Well, thank you very much indeed, and enjoy the rest of your trip on the Lib Dem battle bus. What did you call it? The Yellow Hammer?
Yellow Hammer 1, it's known
Yellow
as,
Hammer 1. Thank you very much, Olivia Rutley there, our GB News political correspondent. But there's some other news, breaking news from Wales, isn't there?
There is.
The First Minister, he's going to suffer a vote of no confidence very soon.
Yes, next week, Vaughan Gething, who's only been First Minister of Wales for 3 months, he'll be facing a vote of no confidence, and that's after, of course, the coalition deal between, or at least the confidence and supplies deal, no, I think it was a coalition, between the Welsh Labour and Plaid Cymru collapsed. Now, they do have a majority of just 1 vote in the Senedd, in the Welsh Parliament, but, of course, Vaughan Gething has sacked one of his cabinet ministers in recent weeks. Could that particular member of the Senedd be his undoing? It's going to be a knife-edge vote. It could come down to just 1 vote, whether or not no confidence is voted in Vaughan Gething as First Minister of Wales. And that has huge echoes of what happened to Humza Yousaf up in Scotland just last month.
And a lot to do with donations for his leadership campaign from someone who committed environmental offences.
Absolutely.
That's the accusation. Lots of money to his leadership campaign.
Hundreds of thousands of pounds to a leadership campaign. There's all sorts of speculation about past association. This person received a big loan from the Welsh Investment Bank, bank, which Vaughan Gething used to preside over. But then more than that, there's a big application for planning permission from this particular convicted criminal that the Welsh Government can grant. Now, this individual then gave a lot of money to the First Minister of Wales in his election campaign. Now, I'm not saying it's anything at all to do with the request for planning permission, but some people have online and in print newspapers raised that link.
Yes, the accusation is that he's corruptible. So there you go. We'll bring you any more on that. But we've got some views coming in, thick and fast. gbnews.com/your say is the way to get in touch.
Yes, Kim has written in on Mickey Mouse degrees. Kim says, I've worked with employers and apprentices, both young and old. I've recruited graduates into companies for management schemes. I would take apprenticeships every single time. Going to university doesn't make a person more intelligent or capable. In fact, one of the biggest problems we had with graduates was a lack of common sense and real-world experience. If you handed them a plank sideways to take through an open door, they'd be bashing the door frame.
It's quite funny, Kim. Stephen says, my daughter did a degree, racked up thousands in debts, has never worked a day in that qualification. As for myself, I joined the army, learned to trade, got my HGV and travelled the world. Well, there you go. I'm sure you have a row or two around the dinner table about your different choices. On the Diane Abbott stuff, though, Lizzie says, I don't think a lot of people care about Diane Abbott. The Labour Party are just playing their stupid games. And BG says she shouldn't be allowed to come back. The fact she supports the likes of Corbyn is enough to put off any sane person. So there you go.
And that's the risk for the Labour Party. I can see an electoral strategy in saying, look, we've turned a page on Jeremy Corbyn. Diane Abbott will not be standing as a candidate. We're a changed Labour Party. We're a new Labour Party. And I can see an argument in saying Diane Abbott was the first black female elected MP. She's a part of Labour history. Of course, she should stand. I can't see an argument for standing in the middle of the road, getting hit by traffic from both sides on this issue.
No, it does look a bit weak, a little bit flip-floppy. Anyway, Rishi Sunak is in Cornwall today. He's pushing his party's plan to create 100,000 more apprenticeships by shutting down these so-called Mickey Mouse degrees.
Well, the law would aim to give England's universities watchdog new powers to shut down courses deemed as underperforming.
Well, we can now speak with the Minister of State for Countering Illegal Migration, Michael Tomlinson. Michael, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I guess the first question has to be, what courses would be shut down if the Conservatives are re-elected?
Emily, good afternoon, and thank you so much for having me on. The straightforward answer is those courses where graduates end up not getting value for money. And as we all know, students paying thousands, more than that, tens of thousands of pounds to go to university, and some of them ending up on wages, for example, of less than £20,000. That's not value for money. That's not good for the students, and that's not good for the economy and good for our country. So we're investing in apprentices. You're seeing pictures of the Prime Minister in Cornwall announcing this scheme, 100,000 more apprentices each year during the course of the next Parliament. And it builds on the bold and ambitious announcements we had so far on national service, on the triple lock plus for the pensions, and now today on the apprenticeships as well.
I can see the argument for saying that you shouldn't be subsidising so-called underperforming Mickey Mouse courses through the government-backed student loans programme, many of which are not paid back. I can't quite see the logic, however, in not allowing universities to offer them at all. What if someone wants to pay to do one of these entirely out of their own pocket? What if a foreign student wants to come and study Mickey Mouse and pour tens of thousands of pounds into the British economy by doing so?
Well, Tom, if it's not value for money, if in fact you're not getting back a return on that, then it's simply not right and not appropriate. And we should be investing that money instead in apprenticeships, in giving people the
Michael
skills.
Tomlinson, I completely accept your argument that it's not right and appropriate for the British taxpayer to be funding that. But what I was saying is, what if this is a foreign student coming in, bringing their own money to pay for one of these courses, or indeed someone paying up front in Britain without using any state subsidy?
That's not going to happen, is it?
Why would you ban that as is the proposal?
Well, Tom, I understand that argument. I understand your point. But instead of pouring tens of thousands of pounds into a course that's not value for money, they should put that money into a course that is value for money. And there are plenty of courses out there that are value for money, where you graduate and you get on to a graduate wage. But this, I think, is a bold offer, 100,000 new apprenticeships, giving people, for example, in my constituency of Mid Dorset and North Poole, even more opportunities to continue to study and to earn on an apprenticeship. And I think that is right. And it's another bold offer from the Conservatives. I was there, Tom, a week ago when the campaign launch started on the Wednesday evening at the XL. And it was an energised Prime Minister that we saw then. And we're seeing more energy today, and there's more to come.
This isn't a new pledge, though, is it? We've heard quite a lot about the government wanting to crack down on these so-called Mickey Mouse degrees. Why should we trust that it's going to happen this time?
Well, I think it's a pretty clear pledge this time. We will put into statute that the Office for Students will have the power to look at this and look in detail. And in fact, Emily, answering your very first question, it will be the Office for Students who will be looking at the detail of this, looking at which courses are in fact those courses that are not of value for money. I've heard the Disney character phrase used. That's not one that I would use myself, but just simply value for money, or rip-off courses, frankly, where you're paying tens of thousands of pounds and you're simply not getting value for money. You're ending up, as I say, on a wage of less than £20,000. That's not good for the student, that's not good for young people, and it's not good for our economy either.
Do you think some of these universities should simply be shut down? I'm looking at a Telegraph table here of some of these courses. So, for example, photography. The average salary 5 years after graduation, £24,000. I mean, that's a lot of student debt to get into for such a low salary after 5 years in a job after graduation. I imagine it very much depends on what university you're going to. Of course, some are higher calibre than others.
I think that's right. It's the university, it's the specific course as well. And that's exactly the sort of detail that the Office for Students will be looking at. It's putting into legislation and enabling the Office for Students to look at exactly that point. And there will be some courses that are perfectly proper and perfectly appropriate. And Tom, back to your point, where it's perfectly reasonable for people to pay tens of thousands of pounds to come over here and to study, because there will be good quality jobs at the end of it. But for those where there simply isn't the value for money, that's not appropriate, that's not investing in our young people, and we're determined to change that with the Prime Minister's announcement today.
Now, Michael Tomlinson, we've spoken about universities. The government has made announcements on pensions, on national service, on inflation even, back down to normal. One thing that we haven't heard a great deal about so far in this general election campaign from the Prime Minister is your department. Illegal migration. It's up by a third this year. Granted, down by a third last year, but things are trending in the wrong direction again.
Tom, that's right. You're right to say it was down by a third last year. And in fact, year on year, it's down by around 30%. But too many people are coming across still. The Prime Minister's pledge to stop the boats depends on the Rwanda scheme. It depends on getting the deterrent up and running. We saw beginnings of the deterrent from people who are saying they don't want to come over to the United Kingdom anymore because they're anxious about being sent to Rwanda. That's not where they want to end up. But in order for the deterrent effect fully to kick in, we need those flights to take off the ground.
10,000 people have already crossed so far this year, more than 10,000. That's higher than by this point the year before. If there isn't a deterrent effect to Rwanda, and I think that there is a strong argument to make that there would be were it to be operational, you're clearly not seeing it yet.
Tom, that's right. Flights have not yet taken off. Don't forget, Labour are determined to scrap this scheme. They want to stop the flights. We want to stop the boats. But the full deterrent effect, I think hinting behind your question, the full deterrent effect will only be seen when those flights actually take off. And it's not just one flight, but a steady rhythm of regular flights, such as the Prime Minister has pledged. That's why we spent all that time getting this legislation through. That's why we need to press on and vote Conservative on July the 4th to ensure that the Rwanda scheme is up and running, as with the deterrent effect.
Now, one man who doesn't think the Rwanda scheme is going to work is Nigel Farage. He's challenged Rishi Sunak to a debate on immigration. Would you like to see that?
Well, respectfully, Nigel isn't the leader of the party. There will be debates, and Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, has challenged Keir Starmer to a debate every week, and Keir has slightly shrugged his shoulders at that. He's dodging the debates, but actually that's where the debate should happen, because it's going to be a clear choice. It's going to be a clear choice.
Well, there's a debate actually on ITV next Tuesday, so he's not dodging that one.
Well, he's dodged the offer, the suggestion, the challenge of a debate every single week. He's certainly dodged that. You're right, there will be one or two debates, but not as many as the Prime Minister had wanted, because we haven't heard any ideas from the Labour Party in contrast to the big, bold ideas and announcements that we've heard from Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister. So I would much rather have seen a debate every week so that we can flesh out what on earth are we going to get if Keir Starmer gets into Downing Street, if he's given the keys to Downing Street. Which flip-flop are we going to get this week? We just don't know. And that's why the Prime Minister challenged him to those debates, so that we could hear more of the ideas from Labour, which have simply been lacking.
Just on the point of Nigel Farage, very finally, does it show that the Prime Minister doesn't want to debate migration, doesn't want to debate illegal migration? He's talking about the economy, about universities, inflation, national service, just about everything other than this.
I don't think that's right. For example, I'm talking to you now. It is my job for countering illegal migration. It's in my job title. That's part of what I do. And you heard actually on the first interview that the Prime Minister gave on the campaign trail, him being asked about the Rwanda scheme. I'm sure immigration and Rwanda are going to be front and centre. I'm certainly doing my bit to tour the studios and talk about it, as well as campaign in my own constituency of Mid Dorset and North Poole and across the country, of course.
OK, well, thank you very much indeed for your time. Michael Tomlinson, Minister of State for Countering Illegal Migration. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, a lot was covered there, but so much more to come on the show. In fact, we're going to get more on that breaking news that Diane Abbott has not, at least not yet, been barred from standing as a Labour candidate. This is a very, very intricate story that has a lot of twists and turns, and it seems that new lines are breaking on it just about every single moment. Much more to come with that in the next hour of Good Afternoon Britain here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
It's the final week to see how you can win a whopping £20,000 cash. And because it's totally tax-free, every single penny will be in your bank account to do whatever you like with. £20,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours this summer. Hurry, as lines close on Friday. You've got to be in it to win it. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
So the UK's most popular baby names have been revealed, with Noah and Olivia again topping the annual list. In at number 2 is Mohammed for boys. List is on the screen here. Number 3 for boys is George. Then it goes Olivia. Then it's Leo, Arthur, and so on. And for girls, so Olivia is number 1. Then Amelia, Isla, Ava, Lily, Ivy, Freya. There we go. Any of those names take your pick? Where's Dawn, by the way?
Well, yeah, there's on the Telegraph website, right, there's a really good way linked into this where you can actually put your name into the search engine, and these are names from 2022, by the way, and it tells you how common your name was. And I did put Dawn in. It's never been that popular. Can't think why. And there were only 5 babies named Dawn in 2022.
Really? That's surprising.
It's not
Wow.
Full confession here, right? My middle name, Mum, I hate you, is Maureen. Why is everyone laughing? My middle name is Maureen, which is a good old-fashioned East End name, and that has completely died out. There were no babies named Maureen.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Names like Keith, for example, Peter. Would you call a baby these days Keith or Ian? Baby Ian?
Without a doubt. I feel like I'm in a persecuted minority, you see, because later on, when I'm watching the boxing with Terry, Steve, Mick, Phil and Kev, right, and Peter, there are no such names featuring in this list. We are dying out. Our names will soon be gone forever, and I feel victimised by it.
Likewise, I should think we should start a campaign group and go on a protest march through London.
Hans, what do you make about Mohammed being number 2 for boys' names?
You know, I'm not going to comment on people. You know, they're going to call what they want to call. What I find interesting is people that do double barrel because they can't decide, and you know, a lot of people do that, and that's a bit difficult because I think you should just pick a name. You know.
I tell you names that are falling down the list though: Harry and Meghan.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Wednesday, the 29th of May. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood.
Now, confusion reigns over the political future of veteran Labour MP Diane Abbott. This morning, she told journalists that she was being barred from standing in the upcoming election. But in the past hour, the Labour leader has denied that claim. What is going on?
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister has vowed to shut down so-called Mickey Mouse courses in universities if he's re-elected. He says the move will help fund more apprenticeships instead. But is university even worth it? We'll be debating that question shortly.
And we'll sort out the crisis in the NHS, a claim from Labour. They say nearly 150,000 people died last year on waiting lists. This comes on the day union doctors declare a fresh 5-day strike just in time for the election.
Well, Diane Abbott is a story that I think is more than just about Diane Abbott. It's a story about how the Labour Party is going to run Britain, how their communications work, and whether there is any plan at the top of the party at all.
Yeah, how should Sir Keir Starmer, play this one? He allowed this story to get out into the open, Diane Abbott claiming publicly that she's been barred from standing for election. This has all been going on for many, many months now. Now he comes out and says, actually, no, we haven't barred her. So what is the answer here? Will she stand as a candidate in the election?
It's very, very odd, because they could have made a clear answer one way or the other, saying Diane Abbott is a great member of the Labour Party, a huge part of Labour history, the first elected black woman MP. They could really have lent in behind her. Or they could have said, actually, what she said was disgraceful. This is someone who represents the worst of the Jeremy Corbyn era of the Labour Party. We're going to have a clean break from that. But they haven't done either. They've issued contradictory statement after contradictory statement and seem to be spinning around and almost trying to create a sense of confusion.
I think he might be playing both sides, don't you, Tom?
Keir Starmer playing both sides, surely.
Playing both sides. Let us know what you think. GBNews.com/your say is the way to get in touch. But it's your headlines with Tatiana.
Emily, thank you very much. 2 minutes past 1, the top stories from the GB newsroom. Labour has not taken any decision to bar Diane Abbott from standing for the Labour Party at the general election. The MP reportedly told media that she'd been blocked from running with the party, but Sir Keir Starmer said this afternoon those reports were not true. She had the whip withdrawn in April last year following comments she made about racism. She later apologised and an investigation concluded in December. She was a close ally of former leader Jeremy Corbyn and served as his shadow Home Secretary. It's unclear whether she'll contest her seat in Hackney North and Stoke Newington. The Health Secretary is calling on the Labour Party to condemn fresh strikes by junior doctors. It's after the British Medical Association confirmed another 5-day walkout starting on the 27th of June. Victoria Atkins says that announcing strike action during an election proves it's a political move and not about patients or staff. But the union says its demand for a 35% increase is only to make up for what it says is 15 years of below-inflation pay. Meanwhile, the head of the Royal College of Nursing is stepping down to launch a bid to become an MP in the general election. Pat Cullen led nurses into unprecedented strike action and says standing down is the hardest decision to make. It's understood she'll run for a seat with the Sinn Féin party. The Welsh First Minister is facing a vote of no confidence after less than 3 months in office. The Welsh Conservatives tabled the motion against Labour's Vaughan Gething following months of controversy around donations during his election campaign. The vote is due to take place next week on the 5th of June. Sir Keir Starmer has given Gething his backing, saying he's looking forwards to being with him in this campaign. The owners of Royal Mail have agreed a £3.5 billion takeover bid by Czech billionaire Daniel Kretinsky. The deal will see universal service obligations continuing, including one price goes anywhere and first-class post 6 days a week. The company's branding will also remain, as will its UK headquarters. But the sale has attracted heavy scrutiny from senior politicians and unions amid concerns over the future of Royal Mail's service. Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer will go head-to-head in the first televised debate of the election campaign next Tuesday. The Prime Minister was aboard an overnight sleeper train to Cornwall last night, unveiling a plan to create 100,000 new apprenticeships. Labour says apprenticeship achievements among those under the age of 19 have dropped by 50% since 2016. But Mr Sunak says that while university is good for some people, it's not the only option.
Not someone who believes that you have to go to university, and all the apprentices I've been talking to this morning are proof of that, describing it as the best decision they ever made. And what we do know is that there are university degrees that are letting young people down. Independent studies say that around 1 in 5 people who are on degrees would have been financially better off not doing them. About 1 in 3 graduates are on non-graduate jobs. So actually, we are better off providing those young people with the opportunity of a high-quality apprenticeship. The regulator will be given the powers to look at underperforming degrees, looking at the progression rates, the dropout rates, the earnings of people on those degrees, and instead we will use that money to fund 100,000 new apprenticeships.
NHS waiting list targets would be met within 5 years of a Labour government. That's according to a pledge by Sir Keir Starmer. The plan would see an additional 40,000 appointments in England each week during evenings and weekends, bringing wait times within the 18-week target. The Tories called it more copy and paste politics and pointed to its plan to invest in NHS technology. But Sir Keir Starmer says it will help health workers get on with the job.
Not the only thing that we do for the NHS, but just the first thing, which is to have 40,000 extra appointments and operations every week. So that means using operating theatres in the evenings, on the weekends, so 40,000. We'll pay for that by getting rid of the non-dom status completely. That's the special tax status for the super rich. That means they don't pay their tax in this country. I think if you live here, you should be paying your tax here, so we'll get rid of that. We also want to get in the money that isn't being paid in tax by those that are avoiding it.
And the Liberal Democrats are pledging an extra £1 billion to champion British farming. Sir Ed Davey has outlined a plan to undo what he calls a legacy of failure by the Conservative government. He's promising to renegotiate overseas trade deals and address a chronic shortage of workers. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Tom and Emily.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 7 minutes past 1 and we're on the sofas. We'll tell you why.
Like the good old days.
Exactly. But let's start this hour with what appears to be total confusion over the future of one of Labour's longest-standing members of Parliament.
Yes, this morning, the Hackney MP, Diane Abbott, revealed that she was dismayed by reports that she could be barred from standing in the forthcoming election. It followed her suspension for writing an article which suggested that Jewish people faced prejudice, but not racism.
But in the past hour, the Labour leader, speaking in the West Midlands, said that there was no such ban in place and indeed no decision had been taken about whether Britain's first black female MP could stand for re-election.
Well, GB News political editor Christopher Hope joins us now. Christopher, is Sir Keir Starmer telling the truth here?
Well, maybe he's not quite clear on the status of Diane Abbott. As you say there, she was suspended, she was investigated. That concluded last year. She then did some training in recognising anti-Semitic comments and views, and she denied any wrongdoing and apologised. The matter was put to bed then, but the process carried on and on. And now we hear, don't we, that she's been restored as an MP for 2 days before Parliament is dissolved finally tomorrow, and she becomes plain old Diane Abbott again. But bigger issue is whether she can campaign and be a member of the Labour Party and even stand in the election. Now, she said on Twitter 2 hours ago, "I'll be campaigning for Labour victory, but I'm very dismayed that numerous reports suggest I've been barred as a candidate." Over to Sir Keir Starmer, who's with reporters today on his election tour of the UK. He said, no, that's not true. No decision has been taken to bar Diane Abbott. The process that we were going through ended with the restoration of the whip. That was yesterday or today. No decision has been made in terms of barring her. And that's where we stand this lunchtime. It's a headache. It may be that Sir Keir Starmer can't bring himself to say that he is going to bar her from standing. Diane Abbott is a totemic Labour politician. Of course, she's the first black MP for 80 years when elected in 87. Someone who has set the bar for so many MPs to follow her, despite what she said. And the question is, what will Sir Keir Starmer do next?
Chris, a thought has just popped into my head this instance about this constructive ambiguity we're hearing at the top of the Labour Party. And that's this. Jeremy Corbyn, a long-standing friend, a very close friend of Diane Abbott, will be launching his independent candidacy for Islington North tonight. I wonder if Diane Abbott had been barred from standing for Labour, perhaps she would appear beside him. She'd have nothing to lose. But if it's ambiguous, if this sort of trinket of a seat is being dangled before her, she won't be appearing alongside Jeremy Corbyn tonight because that would expel her from the Labour Party. Could it be about trying to weaken Jeremy Corbyn as part of this five-dimensional chess game?
Tom, that's really... you are reading heavily into this, and you could well be right. There's no question that she can't stand on the same stage as Jeremy Corbyn tonight, but she said in terms she wants to campaign for a Labour victory, not for Jeremy Corbyn to win as an independent MP in North Islington. So whether that's the case, I think there's lots of wheels turning, but there's lots of drama for all the parties at the moment in trying to select MPs before the deadline next week.
Yes, and what I want to know is, was there anyone else lined up for Diane Abbott's seat? I guess that would
there'll be hundreds of people who'd love it.
Yes, but someone who's been told, perhaps by the party, that they're a shoo-in, I don't know. But Christopher, Wales, the First Minister there, he's in a bit of hot water.
That's right. Vaughan Gething has been the First Minister in Wales for 3 months and is already facing a vote of no confidence next week. This story first broken by GBNews by my colleague Hannah in the newsroom. I mean, it's a big story here. If another devolved First Minister should fall on their sword, it's a row over some controversial donations to his leadership campaign, and it's going to be a very, very tight vote next week. So further difficulties possibly here going into the election. Of course, we have announced an hour or so ago this junior doctors' strike in the week before polling day. So it's building up ahead of steam. But I should say I'm here in Cornwall, by the way, with the Prime Minister. He's with some apprentices here and some veterans, where he's been, you'll see a yellow box behind me. He's been wiring that up, and he was so successful at it that the telecoms engineer said, if you want a new job, you should try telecoms. That might be the case after July the 5th.
Very good. Well, Christopher Hope, thank you very much. We'll speak to you a little bit later in the programme, of course. But joining us now on the sofas, this is why we're on the sofas after all. That's not us. No, here we are. Is Gloria De Piero, of course, a former Labour MP, now GB News presenter as well. But Gloria, let's dive into Wales first, because I've been looking at the numbers, and the first rule of politics is to learn to count. The Labour Party in the Senedd have 30 seats. All opposition parties put together have 30 seats. The convention is the Speaker will break in favour of the government, so there's one vote in it.
Yes, but look, this is a general election campaign going on. How do you seize the initiative if you are the opponents to the Labour Party in Wales? Then you put this vote of no confidence down, which is going to dominate the news agenda. On that particular day, we're talking about it today, you're not going to win, but it stops the Labour Party talking about whatever they want to be talking about. A bit like, actually, the Tories are doing quite successfully at the moment in the UK, whether that be about national service or apprenticeships today. But today's Labour story of Diane Abbott is probably, well, it's absolutely self-inflicted.
Well, how is it self-inflicted?
Well, so a decision has to be made on whether Diane Abbott is allowed to stand in her constituency. My suspicion, I don't know this for sure, my suspicion is that the Labour Party probably did intend to let her in before the election, which they thought was in November. And so if you do that, you know, if you think we can do that in May or June or July, you know, it's not urgent, as long as it... And then people have forgotten about it by the time. Now, of course, we're in the middle of a general election campaign. Diane Abbott is a very... controversial figure. Some people, particularly, you know, some young graduates who might be tempted to vote Green, they will love Diane Abbott, many of those people. Some people in the Red Wall, people who rejected Jeremy Corbyn at the last election, they will be far more sceptical about Diane Abbott. So either way, it's not easy, this. This was not in the grid and yet, we were talking about Diane Abbott.
No. And yet much of the reporting around this seems to suggest that there might have been some sort of backroom deal done about Diane Abbott being able to go out with grace, saying that she was retiring rather than being forced out. Sir Keir Starmer putting out a video about her service and everyone being happy Labour families. What clearly happened at some point this week was someone within the Labour Party did not like that plan and leaked the fact that she was being blocked to the Times, because the Times ran this story and Labour didn't deny it.
Look, I think we can sort of get into the weeds of this.
The weeds are important.
The fact is that we are, on the day that the Labour Party, a party which, you know, everyone knows I support, have a big announcement on cutting waiting lists, 40,000 a week in the NHS within the first year of a Labour government. That's what today's story is supposed to be about. Instead, we are talking about Diane Abbott. I'd just give one word of advice to my party, if I may. Next Tuesday is when the National Executive Committee meets to determine, because you've got loads of Britannia Labour MPs, to determine who will be the candidates in those seats. We cannot be talking. Diane Abbott will be the story until next Tuesday. A word of advice to my party, make a decision now. Do not let you guys be talking about Diane Abbott.
But what do you think the right decision is? Because let's cast our minds back to how this all kicked off. And she wrote a thoroughly offensive letter in The Observer where she appeared to compare the prejudice faced by Jewish people to those faced with my colour hair. I mean, that is an outrageous statement, thoroughly offensive. Why didn't Keir Starmer just boot her out at the time?
Well, he suspended her. We have processes. It's gone on far too long. It's now erupted during a general election campaign when the Labour Party want to be talking about the NHS.
This is the perennial criticism of the Starmer machine, sort of how it's so shrouded in mystery. And, of course, what he said when he was running to be Labour leader, and many people supported him on this, I think it was a sensible thing, let's take the disciplinary processes out of the politicians. We'll give it to an arm's-length body, and so people can't meddle in these processes. But this arm's-length body seems to be pretty political in and of itself. It treats some politicians differently to the way it treats other ones. It lets in Natalie Elphicke and abolishes Diane Abbott. This is going back to those bad old days of spin under Tony Blair, of hiding
so
things
many points here,
and
Tom,
of undemocratic processes.
So there's a national... I mean, I can't believe... I mean, if our viewers are interested, there's a National Executive Committee and Keir Starmer has the majority on that committee. And that will oversee, that will determine, solely that panel, because we're in the middle of a general election campaign, that committee will determine who will replace. And I think it's like 15 vacancies. There'll be no local members.
And there are more vacancies coming up all the time. And there have been some reporting that some members of the NEC might have been pretty friendly with some of those standing down and getting themselves
But is your point that Keir Starmer, you don't particularly care what decision is made? Go on, tell us, what do you think should happen to Diane Abbott?
Well, you see, my mind is in the place of the seat that I used to represent. So I think, reluctantly, I would say she cannot stand, because I can just see, fairly or unfairly, Diane Abbott and Jeremy Corbyn, that wing of the Labour Party, they are toxic in those parts of the country. But, you know, if I represented, I don't know, some trendy Bristol seat...
Islington North.
I would be saying, oh, my gosh, she's got to become a king, so I will, you know, they'll all vote Green if we vote her.
I'm sure we all remember in 2017 when Diane Abbott was Shadow Home Secretary, and the last week of the campaign, she was seemingly not Shadow Home Secretary. Do you remember this, when she was when it was briefed out to the papers and journalists that Diane Abbott had taken a leave of absence in the last few days of the campaign? But that was the position, and the position isn't always the truth.
No.
But it does get to the point that perhaps even Jeremy Corbyn and Seamus Milne and the people at the top of that machine perhaps saw her as a liability in 2017, just when they were surging in the polls.
You could perfectly prosecute that case. We won't know, because we're not Jeremy Corbyn or Seamus Milne.
Well, there you go. We'll find out what happens. As it stands, Keir Starmer says no decision has been made on Diane Abbott, despite lots of reports to the contrary in the press. But thank you so much, Gloria De Piero.
It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, well, we'll have to get Gloria back very, very soon. Still to come. Rishi Sunak's vowed to crack down on the poorest performing degrees and create thousands of new apprenticeships. We're asking, is it even worth going to university? This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Have government done enough, do you think, to actually help them out?
I think there will be occasions where people have tried to run a venture, whether it be a pub, a restaurant or anything sort of like that in the hospitality sector, and it hasn't become commercially viable because of costs, because of bad accounting or because of bad business people. That is just a fact of life. That happens in every sector. So there will be pubs that are closing because they've been poorly run. But I do think there will be occasions where people are forced out of the market. So if local councils aren't being able to pass on business rates, for example, maybe central government can do more. It always tries to do more to cut beer duty and things like that to keep pubs going. So I don't think it's necessarily just as plain as what James is saying, is that, you know, bad pubs will just inevitably be falling by the wayside.
The idea that you two gentlemen, you raging capitalists, support the government stepping in to protect pubs seems to me to be particularly peculiar. If a pub isn't commercially viable, it has to be allowed to fail.
Well, Sadiq Khan, you know, he has a nighttime czar that he pays well over 100 grand.
Yes.
And businesses are going under like you wouldn't believe in London.
She's a real nightmare.
What's your point?
Well, the point is that Labour aren't exactly helping out these businesses, are they? So
I'm saying that pubs should not be protected by the state. I'm all for a pub.
Well, I'm not suggesting that we subsidise pubs.
That has been suggested. That's what James May is railing against. Although I have to say, it's all very well for James May and presumably his very posh gastropub. But if a pub is not fit for purpose, and May makes this point, you know, you've got to have decent, clean loos and a clean pub. And also, realistically, in this day and age, you know, times change. You've got to put on some decent grub as well if you want it to survive. We can't have the government stepping in to save our pubs. And anyway, my understanding over the last 10, 20 years, as a percentage, we haven't lost that many pubs, so they're not going under anytime soon.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 23 minutes past 1. Now, Rishi Sunak has pledged to crack down on the worst performing degrees in the country, what sometimes are derogatorily known as Mickey Mouse degrees. I'm not sure anyone's actually asked Mickey Mouse if he minds being compared to terrible degrees.
Someone was telling me in the break that there is a module in one of these courses that is about Mickey Mouse. So there you go. It is a real thing, a Mickey Mouse module.
I think you can also study Harry Potter these days.
You can. A little bit of underwater basket weaving. That's the classic, isn't it?
Very good.
That's the classic. David Beckham studies is another.
Well,
do these courses still exist?
All of these courses, if they do exist still, are going to be facing the chop under Rishi Sunak. And all the saved money is going to fund an extra 100,000 high-skilled apprenticeships. That's what the Tories have announced today.
Sounds grand, but he says this will stop universities ripping off students for degrees that leave them no better off. So we're asking the broader question. Is university still worth it, or is it, frankly, a rip-off.
And I think this is a big question for many people, because you do get the sense that there is just the necessity to go to university for so many jobs now. So many jobs now require degrees that didn't require degrees in the past. And perhaps we need to go a bit further upstream of this conversation, because...
And so many people end up in non-graduate jobs anyway. I read the statistic that 1 in 3 graduates actually end up in a non-graduate job. So what exactly are they getting? Also see people with upwards of £60,000 of debt, because that interest on those loans is so horrendous. I was lucky I was on the £3,000 a year fees. They went up to 9.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, so there you go.
Well, joining us is Policy Manager at the Higher Education Policy Institute, Josh Freeman, who thinks that taking money from higher education is wrong. Well, Josh, thanks for joining us. I suppose the first big question is, why on earth should the taxpayer subsidise degrees that, frankly, don't lead to people making any money whatsoever?
Thanks. Yeah, I've been on here before, and you know that I'm not a radical on this. I don't think that we should be subsidising everyone to go to university on courses that aren't good value. Frankly, if there are Mickey Mouse degrees, then I think that the government shouldn't be funding them, and we should be maintaining high quality. But I will stand up and say there is a real value to higher education. The education that you get, the quality of those soft skills that you get, the teamwork, the critical thinking. Bear in mind that most graduates will be changing job every year or two in the years after they graduate. There's no point training people for a very specific profession when they're going to be changing jobs very quickly. And what higher education gives you is that breadth, that range of skills that you can apply to whatever it is you go on and do later.
Great in practice, but a lot of people study a photography degree because they want to be a photographer and they want a career in that. And they'll solve this course as being fantastic, and they'll be the next famous photographer out in Milan, or they'll be photographing the royal family. And then they find that actually, on average, 5 years after graduation, they only earn £24,000. I sometimes think that teachers, parents, the universities themselves are selling a bit of a lie here.
Well, I think there's two important parts to what you say. I mean, if you want to be a photographer, that's fantastic, and you go and you give it a go. But I think you'll probably use those skills over your whole life. If you want to be a better photographer, you'll get something out of being able to have that as an artistic pursuit, as something that you can do as a hobby, even if it isn't what you end up doing. But I think there's something more to that. There's something, what you're saying, which is that young people deserve real choice. They shouldn't feel they have to go to university because it's the only option available to them. And so what I really like about the PM's proposal is we're taking that other choice seriously. We're providing meaningful other opportunities for young people, and I do think that's essential.
Now, I can't really think many times in my job that I've used some things that I learnt at university. Doing regression analysis is something that I've never had to do in my day-to-day job, for example. Is it perhaps the case that universities just offer a signalling mechanism to employers? It's not about actually what you learn at university, just as none of us actually need to use Pythagoras' theorem in day-to-day life.
Speak for yourself.
But isn't this just potentially a big racket just to show what could be shown far faster, far more easily, without 3 years of going through all of this? In fact, isn't it quite interesting that some of the most successful people in the world, yes, got into top institutions, but never finished their courses? People like Mark Zuckerberg, who dropped out after a year or two. Some of the biggest billionaires in the world dropped out of university. Is it actually the entrance exam that matters most?
I heard this argument made a few times. By the way, you can make a lot of money doing regression analysis, so I wouldn't rule that out as a future choice. But no, absolutely. I mean, I've heard this argument before. I think people like, when you talk about people like Mark Zuckerberg, for example, no, he didn't have to go. He didn't have to graduate to be extremely successful. And you'd always be able to pick up on cases where this is happening. But Mark Zuckerberg still went and did the first couple of years of university. And it was with someone he met at university that he then went and founded Facebook with and went on to be extremely successful. So there's something there in those networks. Look, Goldman Sachs, PwC, they hire history graduates and they hire philosophy graduates, which is surprising. You'd think they'd go for your sort of STEM graduates and your maths graduates. But what they want is those critical thinking skills, that ability to think clearly, to express yourself. There is some ongoing value in that, even if many of those skills you cannot
Let's be frank, though. It really depends what university you went to. I mean, there are higher caliber universities and there are lower caliber universities. If you're doing a degree course and you got 3 E's at A-level, it's unlikely that you're going to be reaching the same standard as someone who's at Oxbridge.
Leading the Labour Party.
Who's at the
Oxford 3 years.
who's at Oxbridge studying the same subject. Is there an issue here that actually far too many people are going to university, and as a result, some of these courses are actually quite dumbed down? You might not get much further than A-level.
Yeah, so the announcement today is to cut, I think, an eighth, about 130,000 university places for students. Now, we have a regulator that's supposed to do that in England, the Office for Students. It's started doing that, hasn't really got very far, probably because it's not powerful enough to get that. So I think it's strengthening that is already reasonable. But on what basis are we cutting degrees? Is it salary? Are we saying some degrees don't earn enough? In which case, that's going to prioritise, going to university in London, and there'll be lots of courses in London where you just move in and you can earn loads after, regardless of what you've done. Or can we include some of those other benefits? Can we measure somehow, things like dropout rates or the value that you get? It's very tricky to just go in there and say we're going to cut 130,000 courses without thinking about how it's going to be done.
But Josh, I ask, do you think too many people are going to university?
I think we need to make sure that every person who's going to university wants to be there and is there because they actually want to be in university rather than because they feel it's the only option to them.
OK, fair enough. Thank you very much indeed. Josh Freeman, who is a policy manager at the Higher Education Policy Institute.
I think what he said there about the network effects of university are actually really, really important. I think that perhaps
it depends which university.
Yes, but this is the actual value of university. It's not about what you study. And yes, you can have an amazing tutor and you can have some great seminars and you can write a fantastic thesis and all the rest of it. But ultimately, that's not going to matter as much as what you do while you're there, who you meet, what perhaps things that you run that are outside of the classroom.
Yeah, OK. I think at some, high caliber institutions, you may make connections that serve you for, years and years. But I do think there are a hell of a lot of students who regret going to university because what have they got to show for it? A non-graduate job and huge amounts of student debt. And I think it's actually immoral to tell young people that they're going to benefit so greatly from a university
young people are 18 years old. They can make their own decisions.
No, I'm sorry, but when you're 18, when you're 17, 18, which is when you're applying, you don't always know what's best. And if you're told that something is the best option for you, you're going to follow it, probably.
Well, I don't know if you always will. There are lots of people who kick back and do things that they're told not to do. And perhaps the answer here isn't necessarily saying this is good, this is bad, but it's to encourage people to question and to ask back and to dare I even say it, talk back.
Well, I mean, if more and more people have a degree, then the value of that degree goes down. But still to come, we reveal how zombie knives can be bought online still without facing ID or even safety checks. It's a shocking story. We'll have the details after your headlines with Tatiana.
Emily, thank you. The top stories from the GB newsroom. Labour has not taken any decision to bar Diane Abbott from standing for the Labour Party at the general election. The MP reportedly told media that she'd been blocked from running with the party, but Keir Starmer said this afternoon those reports were not true. She had the whip withdrawn in April last year following comments she made about racism. She later apologised and an investigation concluded in December. She was a close ally of former leader Jeremy Corbyn and served as his shadow Home Secretary. It's unclear whether she'll contest her seat in Hackney North and Stoke Newington. The Health Secretary is calling on the Labour Party to condemn strikes by junior doctors after another 5-day walkout was confirmed starting on the 27th of June. Victoria Atkins says that announcing the strike during an election proves that it's a political move and not about patients or staff. But the union says its demand for a 35% increase is only to make up for what it says is 15 years of below-inflation pay. Meanwhile, the head of the Royal College of Nursing is stepping down to launch a bid to become an MP in the general election. Pat Cullen led nurses into unprecedented strike action and says standing down is the hardest decision to make. It's understood she'll run for a seat with the Sinn Féin party. Sir Keir Starmer has thrown his support behind the Welsh First Minister, who's facing a vote of no confidence after less than 3 months in office. The Welsh Conservatives tabled the motion against Labour's Vaughan Gething following months of controversy around donations during his election campaign. The vote is due to take place next week on the 5th of June. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2751 and €1.1745. The price of gold is £1,836.23 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 8,219 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Sunshine and showers for most of us. Those showers are going to be most frequent in the east, particularly the northeast across parts of Scotland. That's where we're closer to this area of low pressure, so they could turn quite slow moving. And there is a weather front as well. So there's a thunderstorm warning in force for much of Scotland through today and into this evening as well. The showers could bring some localised flooding issues. So do take care if you're out and about across these areas of Scotland. Across many eastern areas as well, you're likely to see some heavy showers through the day, but they will move through a little quicker than further north. And in the west, it will be a fairly bright day, a bit of a brisk breeze, but temperatures climbing a little higher than they did yesterday. Highs of 20 degrees or 21 are possible in the far south. Should stay dry across the south for this evening, but it's across eastern Scotland where these heavy showers, thundery showers, will continue into this evening, well towards 10 or 11 o'clock possibly. And the heavy showers will continue into parts of northern England as well. Some showers across Northern Ireland. Further south and west, it will be a little bit drier, but you can't rule out the odd shower here and there. But I think across the south coast, it should be a fairly fine end to the day with temperatures still around 18 degrees. And it'll stay fairly dry through the first half of the night for many southern and central areas. But into the north, that's where those heavy showers are going to continue, particularly as they push into parts of northern England through this evening. And then showers breaking out across parts of Wales into parts of the southwest of England by tomorrow morning, possibly. So many areas are at risk of some showery outbreaks of quite heavy rain through this evening. And those bands will continue their journey southwards through tomorrow morning. So central areas of Wales and England could see some rain first thing. Further north, though, it does turn a little bit drier for some across western parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, western northern England as well. And it will be a drier and brighter day across the west generally on Thursday, but still in the east, there's further showers to come.
The latest GB News travel.
Westbound on the M67, there is a partial closure at junction 1 for Denton due to an obstruction on the road. Slow traffic as a result. Westbound on the M62, a lane closure due to a broken down vehicle. That's from junctions 28 through to 27, but traffic is coping well. Speed restrictions continue for Kent and coastbound on the M20. It's from junction 8 for Leeds Castle through to Ashford at 9. Diversion routes are in place. It's all cleared for the clockwise side of the M20. An earlier accident saw a lane closure at St Albans at junction 22. That's now cleared. All lanes have reopened, and that's the same for the westbound side of the M27. All lanes reopened on the exit slip road at junction 7 for Hedge End. The earlier broken down vehicle has been removed. So that's the very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 38 minutes past 1, and we're going to get to some of your views in just a moment. But first, Sadiq Khan has criticised the government's failure to ban so-called zombie knives, labelling it a betrayal of safety. He's calling on James Cleverly to fast-track legislation to bring forward a ban on the sale of these kinds of knives.
Well, GB News reporter Charlie Peters has gone ahead and purchased some of these so-called zombie knives, and he didn't have to submit ID or pass any safety checks as per online requirements for retailers, which is slightly worrying.
Yes, well, Charlie joins us in the studio now. And Charlie, you've brought along two pretty enormous, pretty vicious-looking knives.
Terrifying.
Yes, that's right. These are so-called zombie-style knives that I've got here. So a zombie knife is anything over 8 inches with a pointed end, a cutting edge, and also a serrated section. And it can also have, as we do have here, these gaps in the middle of the knife. Now, the reason why this is not called a zombie knife is because the original definition, when it was first facing a ban in 2016, required the knife to have violent language or emblems on the blade. Now, this left a loophole in the law for the best part of 8 years. It's only in January that James Cleverly announced that zombie-style knives would come in as a new definition to stop them. 6 Home Secretaries have made 16 announcements since 2016, the Home Office Minister there being Sarah Newton, calling to ban these items. And this has meant that retailers have allowed to sell them online. I got them because there is still that loophole open where, as long as the blade has no violent language on them, you can pick them up and no emblems.
And Charlie, just show it up for us again a little bit so we can see high for the camera, because this is a knife that is clearly designed to do a lot of damage. The smooth blade at the top and then the serrated bit, from what I understand, that's so that if you stick it in someone, it then doesn't easily and cleanly come out. It causes damage as it's being pulled out.
May I just say, for those of you at home, that it is actually quite uncomfortable sitting even this close to a knife like that. There is absolutely no way in my mind that anyone should be able to get their hands on that. But is it almost a futile exercise trying to get these things off the market?
Well, 2 years ago, the government brought in restrictions saying that you had to pass an ID check online and in person. And my investigation have found that many retailers perhaps were not following in that duty. I was able to purchase these without an online check, and also in person. They were delivered to an address where there was no check on my ID. In fact, I wasn't even the person picking it up. So they delivered it to somebody who wasn't me. So a total failure by the courier and the retailer in that situation. Now, Sadiq Khan has said the government has failed to put forward this ban in time. Of course, with Parliament being dissolved tomorrow, it's not been included in the wash-up ahead of the general election. So this ban is meant to come in September. These knives are still legal for me to have until I take them out in public. That would be a crime.
And, Charlie, how prevalent are these kinds of knives? Because I'm trying to imagine someone walking down the street in any large city in the country. I mean, these are pretty hard to hide. Normally what we see when we see stabbings is sort of flip blades and switch blades.
They put them down their trouser leg.
But how common are these?
Well, Emily's right. There have been cases where, even in like very popular public spaces, people have been seen revealing these so-called zombie knives from their trousers, from within their tracksuit bottoms. In West Yorkshire, that police force revealed through a Freedom of Information request that they had seen a significant spike in zombie knife-related incidents. Last year, there were about 50,000 knife-related crimes, of which about 23% were from the Metropolitan Police, facing the bulk of those incidents. But there aren't any dedicated stats on these particular blades. But it's clear that their purpose is nothing good. I mean, a 15-year-old girl was killed by a zombie knife on a bus in Croydon in September, and that's when a renewed focus on the blades came into effect. But as we've demonstrated soon after, it's very easy to purchase them. You don't necessarily need to face online checks, and the government is still failing to get a grip of banning them.
We're clearly not going to get into a situation where we're going to ban every kind of knife that exists. Surely what happened the last time is we banned so-called zombie knives, and then these knives mutated. They changed, and we got now zombie-style knives. If these get banned, and I don't know the precise definition, you said the clean and then serrated blade, surely a different design will come about, and then the politicians will have to ban that. And then a new design will come out, and the politicians will have to ban that. I mean, ultimately, are we looking at the symptom here, whereas actually the cause might be something deeper in society, and instead of banning things, we should get to the root cause here?
That is a perspective I've heard from a lot of police officers I've been speaking to in the last last couple of days, building this story, telling me that the problem here isn't necessarily the availability of blades. It's not a supply-side issue of weapons, but rather a lack of effective and confident policing. Police officers wanting to do more stop and search, wanting to challenge more people who might be carrying knives, but not feeling as though they have the political backing to achieve that. Rory Gogahan is the founder of the Public Safety Foundation and a former police officer. He told me that really police officers don't care a jot about the banning of knives because all too often they'll just find a new purpose to get it. And it's always going to be legal to purchase a kitchen knife or a
Charlie,
gardening
having
tool.
these blades here on the table brings the horror of these knife crimes into sharp focus. Well, yes, no, pardon the pun. But it really does. These things are vicious looking. They are horrible. I take your point that banning these, something else pops up. But it is quite incredible that everything like this should surely be banned from retail. There's no reason you need these kind of weapons.
Well, I just find it very hard to imagine how we're going to get to a state where the country is going to ban every single different formulation of metal.
Anything can be a weapon, I guess.
Yes.
In response to Sadiq Khan's criticism, a Conservative Party spokesperson did tell me that they would take no lectures from Sadiq Khan on crime, and they added that knife crime has risen by a shocking 20% last year in Labour-run London. They went on to say that also Khan was the only police and crime commissioner to miss police recruitment targets, failing to recruit 1,000 extra officers, even with the money from the Conservative government available for recruitment. They also pointed out that they had banned zombie knives in 2016, but as I'm showing you right now, clearly they necessarily haven't fully forced through that ban.
And we learnt, didn't we, that knife crime elsewhere in the country has actually gone down.
Down by 5%.
London, it's gone up. Everywhere else, it's gone down. Not a huge amount, but a significant amount. So that's interesting. Yes, Sadiq Khan clearly trying to put the pressure on the government rather than his own
How much of that can you actually
mayorship
put at the feet of Sadiq Khan? I mean, knife crime up in London, down in the rest of the country. It's a very strong line. The Home Secretary, James Cleverly, has said it repeatedly in interviews during this election campaign. But ultimately, how much control does Sadiq Khan actually have of crime and policing in London?
Yeah, well, he has particular offices, and he has the PCC, of course. That's a part of his remit. But a Labour
Crime Commission.
Yeah, but a Labour source told me, I mean, there's all these battles over stats. They said that knife crime has soared by 80% since 2015, when the Conservatives first came into the administration at the moment. So there is this battle, of course, over who's to blame for knife crime, who's to blame for these varying statistics and all these shocking, appalling stories that we keep hearing about these blades. But one thing is for certain at the moment, this Conservative ban hasn't worked, but at the same time, a lot of critics saying that it doesn't really matter what you ban. What you need to get to the bottom of is why people feel the need to stab others.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Charlie, for doing that investigation for us. Shocking to see those weapons here so close. But let's move on, because lots of you have been getting in touch about what we've been talking about regarding the old Mickey Mouse degrees. You can get your views in gbnews.com/your say.
Yes, David says the number of people I know who say their degree was of no use and enjoyed 3 years drinking is considerable. Hang on, are you trying to say that 3 years drinking is of no use? Right, we're not going to get to any other views because Keir Starmer is talking. Let's have a listen.
Thank you so much for that welcome, Worcester. It's absolutely fantastic to be here. Thank you, Stephen, for sharing your story, because I think it's very important in this campaign that the country hears from the people who are being impacted by 14 years of failure. Rishi Sunak goes around in a helicopter. He doesn't see and understand what is happening and the impact of what his government has done to so many people's lives. So, Stephen, thank you for sharing that. And we share your pain on waiting and waiting and waiting for an operation that you deserve to have. And there are so many others who are in that same boat that we have in our mind's eye when we make our decisions. But it is so good to be here in Worcester. It is so good to be here with all of you, because at last we have a general election. And since that has been called, we have been campaigning positively for the change that we want to see across the country. Because we've been waiting for a general election. The country has been waiting for a general election, and it is desperately, desperately needed. And so if you are a family that has been struggling with the cost of living, if you're a business that's been really up against it these past few years, whether you've served your country, then this is for you. Because what happens in a general election is the power goes to our voters. The power to determine the future of their own lives, their communities' lives, and of our country. The power to change our country for the better, and to draw a line and say no more of this chaos and division, a chance to turn the page, to change and to rebuild our country with Labour. That is what this election is about. That is the choice on the ballot. And when I say draw a line on 14 years of chaos and division, it has been 14 long years of chaos and division and of failure. Too many prime ministers, too many chancellors, chopping and changing, impacting on people's lives. And that has a cost, a human cost. You heard from Stephen about the cost to him. There's cost all over the country. I went to Alderhay Hospital. This is a brilliant children's hospital up in Liverpool. It is the very, very best of our NHS staff. I went to the ward where they do operations on 0 to 2-year-old babies. This is extraordinary. Go in that ward and you can't be anything other than completely humbled by the bravery, actually, of the children that are being operated on and the incredible skill of the team of surgeons that are doing very difficult heart surgery on tiny, tiny little human beings. And that is really uplifting. It's very humbling. But when I left Alderhay, I was really angry because I found out that more children aged 6 to 10 are being admitted to Alderhay to have their rotten teeth taken out than they are for any other operation. That is the price they are paying for the failure of this government. They're literally having their teeth taken out. And that should anger anybody who cares about our children, the next generation in this country. And of course, those brilliant staff having to spend their time using their skills to operate on something which was completely preventable. Another example is in Stafford. I was there on Saturday, actually in the kitchen, with a couple of paramedics, actually, and her wife, who worked in a jewellery shop. They got 2 children. They bought their house 5 years ago. I went there to have a cup of tea with them. Their mortgages just run out. They had a fixed rate mortgage for 5 years when they bought their house. They could afford that. It's now run out. They've spent a long time researching the best possible deal that they can get now, and it's hundreds of pounds more a month. Hundreds of pounds more. They don't know what to do. They can't afford it. They're going to have to move. That is the price that they are paying for the damage that the Tories have done to our economy, the real-life impact. These are small examples. There are so many other examples across the country of people paying a real price. And I tell you what, when Rishi Sunak says, we've turned a corner, it's all fine, you're all better off, he should go into that kitchen with the 2 people I was with on Saturday morning and say to them that they're better off, because they will give him a pretty blunt answer about the state of the country under him. And I grew up working class. I know what it's like not to be able to pay your bills. My dad worked in a factory, my mum was a nurse, and we couldn't always make ends meet. And what you do in those circumstances, you choose which utility you will lose. So we lost the phone. We decided we'd have the phone cut off because we couldn't afford the bill. That is the sort of decision that so many families across the country are having to take. So we have to have a Labour government to stop this chaos and division. We cannot have another 5 years of this. But here's the good news. You don't have to put up with it. You don't have to put up with it. You can vote for change. This is the chance. This is the change election. This is the election where we can...
And there is Keir Starmer making a stump speech in front of some of his activists in the West Midlands. Of course, the Labour Party won the West Midlands mayoralty by a hair's breadth in the local elections. If one vote in each polling booth around the electoral area had gone from Labour to Tory instead, It would have been Andy Street who held on to that, but instead it went Labour.
Well, he's rallying the troops there. He's trying to rally the troops. The sleeves rolled up to his elbows, talking about the cost of living, talking about the NHS, talking about how his dad worked in a factory.
This is his sort of look for the entire general election campaign. It's the sleeves rolled up, let's get down to business look. But it was interesting that he mentioned a story from his own childhood about his parents cutting off the phone line because they couldn't pay the phone bill. That's something that we haven't really heard from Keir Starmer. He's injecting some more of his personality, his personal circumstances, into his speeches, where he's learning a little bit more about who Keir Starmer is.
Yes, and I'm sure we'll see many more of these meets, these speeches in front of activists, rallying the troops with everything that's going on with Diane Abbott and everything. He wants the narrative to be very much on change.
Well, it is a busy news day. Not least do we have those Mickey Mouse degrees, Diane Abbott, and we haven't even covered enough about those new NHS strikes in the days leading up to the election. It's all coming in the next hour.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. Sunshine and showers will continue this afternoon. They could turn quite heavy, particularly in the east, with a risk of thunderstorms. In the west, though, it is turning a little bit drier. That's as high pressure is slowly starting to build in from the west. But in the east, that's where low pressure's in charge. And where we're close to that area of low pressure, up to the eastern areas of Scotland, that's where the showers will be quite slow moving into this evening. So further impacts from the rain are possible overnight. And that rain is going to push southwards through the night, bringing a risk of some heavy showers into parts of Wales and northern England by tomorrow morning. Further south, though, it should stay fairly dry overnight, and it will be another mild start to the day, and fairly dry across the south first thing. So some early sunshine is possible here. We've got a northerly wind developing on Thursday, and so it will be a bit of a cooler day for most of us. And where we're more sheltered from that northerly wind across the central belt, southern areas of Scotland, there's a chance of some brightness first thing, especially across southeastern areas of Northern Ireland as well, but many areas will see a bit of a cloudy start to the day with some outbreaks of heavy rain possibly into parts of Wales, central areas of England, across the south coast as well. There could be some heavy showers breaking out first thing. So a mix of sunshine and showers once again on Thursday, but the showers will become much more focused across eastern areas where we're still close to this area of low pressure, bringing that more unsettled and cooler weather. But into the west, we start to see that drier and finer weather developing, and so it should be a fairly bright and dry afternoon for many western areas of the UK tomorrow. Temperatures are a little lower than today tomorrow, just into the mid to possibly high teens, but in the sunshine it will still feel pleasant enough. Now, through Thursday evening, rain will likely continue across eastern areas. Into the west, though, that dry and fine weather is developing, and that is the theme as we head towards the end of the week and the weekend, with more in the way of sunshine developing and temperatures rising towards the low 20s.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You really could be our next big winner with an incredible £20,000 in tax-free cash to play with this summer. What would you spend that on? Well, whilst you're thinking about it, listen to some of our previous winners getting that winning phone call from us.
You're the winner of the Great British Giveaway.
I'm slipping neck. Oh dear.
Oh my God, are you joking?
Do you know what? I've never won anything like this in my life.
Oh my God, this is amazing. Thank you.
Hurry, as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
I'm Arlene Foster on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
What?
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
Afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Wednesday, the 29th of May. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
We said we'd do it high energy, didn't we? Well, there's confusion over the political future of veteran Labour MP Diane Abbott. This morning, she told journalists that she was being barred from standing in the upcoming election. But the Labour leader has now denied that claim. Who's telling the truth? And is there any one single truth? Is there chaos at the top of the Labour Party?
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister has vowed to shut down so-called Mickey Mouse degrees if he's re-elected. He says the move will help fund more apprenticeships. But is university even worth it?
And we'll sort out the crisis in the NHS, a claim from Labour. They say nearly 150,000 people died last year on waiting lists. This comes on the day junior doctors declare a fresh 5-day strike, just in time for the general election.
Now, lots of you have been getting in touch about these so-called Mickey Mouse degrees. Catherine says unis are running as businesses and will offer anything to bring in a buck. I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah, although...
Bums on seats, isn't it? Bums on seats.
Is it a bad thing that universities are run as a business? Maybe more things should be run as a business. Maybe if they were run more like a business, they'd stop being subsidised. Yeah, but that's the legitimate issue. But Bren says if you want to be a photographer, join your local photographic club. £20 a year. That'll save you £9 grand.
Is that what you do, Bren? Are you part of a club? Yes, it was quite funny when that chap we were talking to said, "Oh, it doesn't matter if you don't get a job in photography after all of that debt. It'll be a hobby for life. A hobby for life." Jenny says uni is a great choice if you study proper subjects that will be useful. Combine university with an apprenticeship and you're on to a winner. Anyone can take a photo and get paid, so why go to university? I think you're right. I think the best thing is actually university courses where you work a bit at the same time.
Although the chap from the Higher Education Policy Institute said that actually the number of philosophy graduates that are hired by Goldman Sachs. It's not about...
if you go to Russell Group University.
Yeah, but you can study something that seems irrelevant and makes you more fun at dinner parties, and then end up doing something completely... Or more of a bore. Very good point.
More of a bore. What was it you mentioned earlier? Regression studies?
Regression analysis.
Oh, that's very interesting, isn't it, at dinner? Yeah.
Well, you wouldn't be getting your graph paper out at dinner, but you might do it, after dinner. It's a fun Pictionary activity.
You can become an absolute bore by studying. Anyway, it is your headlines with Tatiana.
Emily, thank you. The top stories from the GB newsroom. Labour has not taken any decision to bar Diane Abbott from standing for the Labour Party. The MP reportedly told media that she'd been blocked from running. with the party, but Sir Keir Starmer said this afternoon those reports were not true. She had the whip withdrawn in April last year following comments she made about racism. She later apologised and an investigation concluded in December. She was a close ally of former leader Jeremy Corbyn and served as his shadow Home Secretary. It is unclear whether she'll contest her seat in Hackney North and Stoke Newington. The Health Secretary is calling on the Labour Party to condemn fresh strikes by junior doctors. It's after the British Medical Association confirmed another 5-day walkout starting on the 27th of June. The union says its demand for a 35% increase is only to make up for what it says is 15 years of below-inflation pay. Victoria Atkins says that announcing strike action during an election proves it's a political move and not about patients or staff.
Junior doctors had a 10.3% pay rise last year. They walked out of negotiations towards the end of the year when I wanted to give them more. I've tried to keep the channels of communication open. I have gone over and above the Junior Doctors Committee heads in order to produce a programme of work with NHS England to improve working conditions for junior doctors, because I understand they have genuine concerns and I want to help them. And now I've entered mediation with them in good faith to try to find solutions to this, but they walk away yet again.
Sir Keir Starmer has thrown his support behind the Welsh First Minister, who's facing a vote of no confidence after less than 3 months in office. The Welsh Conservatives tabled the motion against Labour's Vaughan Gething following months of controversy around donations during his election campaign. The vote is due to take place next week on the 5th of June. Now, an investigation into severe turbulence that hit a Singapore Airlines flight last week has found that a rapid change in gravitational force caused the plane to suddenly drop. The flight was forced to divert to Bangkok when passengers and crew were suddenly thrown into the air, with some hitting the ceiling and walls. A 73-year-old British man died of a suspected heart attack, while dozens of others were injured. The investigation's preliminary findings suggest that turbulence caused a sudden vertical acceleration, which saw passengers become airborne before hitting the floor within just 4 seconds. Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer will go head-to-head in the first televised debate of the election campaign next Tuesday. The Prime Minister was aboard an overnight sleeper train to Cornwall last night, unveiling a plan to create 100,000 new apprenticeships. University leaders have warned the policy could run down and undermine the higher education sector and deter people from studying for degrees. Labour says apprenticeship achievements among those under the age of 19 have dropped by 50% since 2016. But Education Secretary Gillian Keegan says they're good for business.
Businesses know what skills they need. That's why we've worked with 5,000 businesses to make sure we developed and designed this high-quality apprenticeship system from the last 12 years. So we have done everything to work with businesses to make sure that young people can be assured when they go on these apprenticeships, they will have a high-quality experience and it will be something that businesses need. And we need the same in all of our university degrees. Now, our universities are top class, 4 out of the top 10 universities in the world, and all of them will want that brand image to be preserved, and this goes a step to making sure that we do that.
NHS waiting list targets would be met within 5 years of a Labour government. That's according to a pledge by Sir Keir Starmer. The plan would see an additional 40,000 appointments in England each week during evenings and weekends, bringing wait times within the 18-week target. The Tories called it more copy and paste politics and pointed to its plan to invest in NHS technology. But Sir Keir Starmer says it'll help health workers get on with the job.
Not the only thing that we do for the NHS, but just the first thing, which is to have 40,000 extra appointments and operations every week. So that means using operating theatres in the evenings, on the weekends, so 40,000. We'll pay for that by getting rid of the non-dom status completely. That's the special tax status for the super rich. That means they don't pay their tax in this country. I think if you live here, you should be paying your tax here, so we'll get rid of that. We also want to get in the money that isn't being paid in tax by those that are avoiding it.
For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Tom and Emily.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 8 minutes past 2. Now, GB News political editor Christopher Hope is on the campaign trail with Rishi Sunak today in the West Country. Chris, let's start with the news from the Labour Party that the Labour MP Diane Abbott, well, she's not been barred from standing in the general election, at least not yet. A great deal of confusion over this.
Hi, Tom. Hi, Emily. Huge confusion about the status of Diane Abbott. We know, of course, she was suspended as an MP for that letter that she wrote to the Observer, likening or comparing racism to that black people have experienced against Jewish people, saying it's not as serious for other people who aren't black. That really damaged her. She had to apologise. She did some training. She said sorry. Investigation closed at the end of last year. She has had the whip restored in the past 2 days before Parliament is dissolved tomorrow. But her status as a Labour member is not at all clear. Now, she has said, Diane Abbott said about 3 hours ago now, she's delighted to have the Labour whip restored and to be a member of the Parliamentary Labour Party. She'll be campaigning for a Labour victory, she says, but she's very dismayed that numerous reports suggest she's been barred as a candidate. That prompted Sir Keir Starmer to say about an hour ago or so on his campaigning rounds today, no, that's not true. No decision has been taken to bar Diane Abbott. The process that we were going through ended with the restoration of the whip. No decision has been made in terms of barring her. Now, the Tories have leapt on this. Jonathan Gullis, the deputy chairman of the party, saying that Sir Keir Starmer is flip-flopping. He's saying one thing 1 minute and not one thing the next. And what kind of leader does this country want after July the 4th if Labour win the election? He's Prime Minister. And Lord Woolley, a crossbench peer, he's been saying this lunchtime that Labour could pay a high political price if they treat Diane Abbott with utter disrespect. They've got 48 hours, he says, to get it right.
Christopher, the clock is running, time is running out.
It does seem that way, and it's not really clear about Diane Abbott's status, and she is so important to the Labour movement, the first black MP for, I think it was 60 years when elected in 1980. Totemic for so many on the Labour movement. And there's the problem that Sir Keir Starmer's got. He's trying to be firm with the left, show the rest of the country that the Labour is a changed party, but you can't disrespect someone of the stature of Diane Abbott. There's a view that she's served her time being suspended. She's done her penance with the training. It's time to let her back in. And if he's seen to show her disrespect, he is storing up problems for himself in the future.
Now, Chris, we can tell from the cool blue glow behind you on your battle bus that you're following the Conservatives and the Prime Minister. Where on earth are you off to next? You're somewhere in Cornwall.
That's right. We've been to Penzance so far, Tom, on the overnight sleeper train with the Prime Minister. He did get the sleeper train. He didn't get the chopper. He boarded the train. He was a few cabins down from the GBNews cabin overnight, and then he did buy us bacon butties on arrival in Penzance. Since then, he's been the big theme here for the Tory party is apprentices. They want to scrap 1 in 8 university places, get rid of these courses which are questionable, cost lots of money, and don't really result in well-paid jobs to pay off young people's student loans. So he wants them to do apprenticeships. That's the big drive. £900 million investment in that, saved by closing down underperforming courses by the Office for Students. That's a big idea, and that's why he's just been wiring up a broadband connector. In fact, he was so good at it, the engineer said, why not become a telecoms engineer? Maybe he might do if he loses his job on July the 4th.
Did the Prime Minister have a bacon butty as well? Did he join you?
He did. He gave me the first bacon butty. He handed them out. But he said he'd eat his elsewhere. He's learned the lesson from Ed Miliband in 2015 not to be photographed eating a bacon butty.
What is it with politicians and food? Theresa May, I think, was trying to eat fish and chips and looked really a bit squiffy, as did,
yes.
What was it, with Tony Blair and his ice cream. With Gordon Brown was another one.
You just got to be
holding
confident.
2 ice creams, looking a bit like a Wally.
You've got to eat like no one's watching. Thank you very much indeed, Christopher Hope, our political editor on board the Conservative battle bus.
Well, let's get some more on this idea about education, what it does for us and perhaps what it doesn't. David Harkin is the CEO of edtech company 8 Billion Ideas. It helps provide students with future skills. Thanks for joining us. I suppose the big question is, there is this huge perception that some university courses simply aren't up to scratch, simply don't provide the skills that are necessary. What's your take?
Good afternoon, both. Thank you very much for having me. Look, I'll begin by saying every student I've ever met across here in the UK and around the world has an amazing imagination, but every student is on a journey with a different set of skills and belief that they might need in the future. So I like the move of more apprenticeship programs being on offer for young people. That's more options for a young person, which is critical. But I do believe the university space over the last decade has missed a trick. And you talked about at the beginning of the show about the opportunity to start businesses, micro business, be a little bit more entrepreneurial. And I do feel the value of the degree and the university experience does need to be challenged a little bit. So for me, it's not just about the degree when a child or a student goes to university. It's about how can that student build up the skills that they're going to really need, and that's creativity and problem solving. Evidence after decade after decade after decade shows that they're the two key skills that we can rely on in the future. So how can we build a culture of curiosity and creativity at university? But I do feel we're missing a slight trick by not considering what we're actually doing in the secondary school space and the primary school space with curriculum reform, because fundamentally schools are there to help a child get ready for their future. And we're talking about apprenticeship programs today, we're talking about degree, but we also need to make sure that the conversation is talking about curriculum reform, which hasn't happened in a decade here in the UK, and a lot has changed, particularly the pandemic in the last few years. The world of work could be frightening for a young person. We've got a different lens on it at 8 Billion Ideas, that it's actually could be incredibly exciting, that you're no longer limited by postcode to opportunity. So we need to make sure that we're not just talking about the top end of education. We're talking about what's happening in our secondary schools, primary schools and early years, and try and have a synced up strategy when it comes to future skills.
I mean, that's an excellent point, David. It's all well and good talking about higher education, but if you're not learning the right things in primary school, in your early years, in secondary school, then you're not going to go as far, are you really? But do you back the Prime Minister's point that there are some courses that just aren't offering value for money and that they actually should get scrapped?
I think it's about more options and the right options and picking them. I do believe there's degrees out there which are dubious, which are they of value for money when most university students are leaving in £45,000 worth of debt and setting them up for the future. So I think a review of what's out there is sensible. But I actually think the conversation needs to go on the product of the university experience. It's not just about the degree. It's what are our universities doing to really help young people pick up more skills than the knowledge that the degree might provide and be challenged in that space too.
Well, thank you very much indeed for your time. David Harkin, you're the CEO of edtech company 8 Billion Ideas. Thank you very much indeed.
Fantastic stuff. Love edtech. I love. You can put tech after anything now, can't you? Sort of edtech, fintech, biotech. Anyway.
Any others? Well,
I'm sure there are more. I'm sure there are more.
But it's true. You know, if you come out of school not being able to read and write, so then it's not much use you going to university, is it?
This is why the crazy thing that happened in Scotland, with the abolition of student fees, but not just abolition of student fees. There was money raided from early years to pay for that. Actually, what happened? Fewer disadvantaged people ended up going to university because they didn't get the early stuff. It's the early stuff that matters.
Yeah, exactly. And some schools are sadly letting us down. But the confusion continues over the future of one of Labour's longest-standing MPs, doesn't it?
Yes, this morning the Hackney MP, Diane Abbott, revealed she was dismayed by reports that she could be barred from standing in the forthcoming election. This all followed her suspension after writing an article which suggested that Jewish people didn't face racism, but only prejudice.
Yes, and the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, now says no such plan is in place and no decision has yet been taken about whether Britain's first black female MP can stand for re-election. Now, this is interesting because the time is running out, isn't it, really? Political commentator Matthew Stadlen joins us now. Matthew, lots of people are accusing Sir Keir Starmer of hiding the truth here, being a tad duplicitous, even lying.
Let's deal, if we can, with the Diane Abbott case itself very briefly first. So I thought her original comments that were published in The Guardian were appalling, basically creating a hierarchy of racism, saying that Jews and gypsies and travellers and Irish don't experience the same sort of racism as black people. And she compared the experience of Jews and gypsies and so forth to those with red hair. Now, I'm both Jewish and red-haired, and I can tell you that, yes, I've experienced a hell of a lot of discrimination for being ginger, but that is nothing in terms of the pain it causes and the appallingness of anti-Semitism. So I thought what she said was outrageous. However, she apologized very, very quickly. And there is no doubt that not only has she herself been the victim of appalling racism, but she has done a huge amount to fly the flag, to trailblaze for people of colour.
Hang on, Matthew. Her apology, I want to dig into this because her apology, at least initially, said that she apologised for what she wrote, and in error, an early draft was sent.
Yeah.
Now, I've read through this letter more times than I care to, and I don't understand how it could be an early draft. The whole point of the letter was that black people face racism and Jews don't. I mean, how could that be an early draft that was going on to mean something that was different in any way? It seems that her apology was itself mired in miscommunication.
My understanding from reading the report on this is that BBC Newsnight understand that Diane Abbott accepts there was only ever one draft. And therefore, you're right to point out there seems to be some sort of inconsistency. However, there's no doubt that she did apologise, and she said, regardless of the numbers of drafts, there was no excuse. So she acknowledged that she messed up big time. But really, this, in a sense, this has now become a bigger story even than Diane Abbott. And as I say, she is a big figure. She's a national figure. She's done a huge amount for minorities in this country. But this has become a bigger story because there are now questions over the ways in which it has been handled by Labour and by Keir Starmer. Now, he insists that the process itself is independent. But this has been rumbling on now for a year, and he is the leader of the party. So he's got to take a degree of responsibility. In my view, this should have been sorted out a long time ago. And this is a key point, I think. If she is considered to be OK to have the whip restored, and that's clearly what Labour do consider because they have restored the whip, then surely she should then be allowed to stand as a candidate in the election a few weeks away. You cannot, as the Labour Party, have it both ways. You can't say, you're now a Labour MP, you've done your penance, you've done your anti-Semitism course, you're back now, but by the way, you can't stand in the election.
Matthew, do you think personally she should be allowed to stand? Because you seem to suggest that because she has fought racism and experienced racism herself, then we should forgive her for essentially downplaying anti-Semitism, comparing it to prejudice against redheads.
As I said, I think those original comments were appalling. I do believe that I think she did apologise fully, even if there was a miscommunication in the apology.
So she should be allowed to stand.
Well, I think it's a really difficult one. But this isn't really about what I think about whether she should stand. What I do think is that if she has had the whip restored, which she has, you can't have it on the one hand, on the other hand, and say, OK, you're a Labour MP.
I'm just interested to know your personal opinion because you are a Jewish Labour voter. And I'm interested to know how you feel about it.
I'd forgive her.
OK. Well, there you go.
I think it does show the difficulty that the Labour Party have had with this, because it does seem that they are in this sort of stuck-in-the-middle position, not really knowing what to do, sort of in this halfway stasis.
Politically, this is important, as I say, because what the Tories want to do is cast Starmer as a figure of chaos. It's a ruthless person, as he says. He said, didn't he, in a recent interview, that he sort of enjoys being ruthless. They want to cast him as a flip-flopper, and they've tried to do that. They've called him Sir Flip-Flop, and there's a suggestion that he may be flip-flopping here. So he needs to get a grip on this very, very quickly. The other political issue is that Diane Abbott, even though this was an appalling thing she said, and I've said that very openly, I was really offended myself personally when she said it. The fact, nonetheless, is she's done a huge amount against racism in this country. She was the first female black MP.
Yeah.
And that politically is dangerous for Starmer within the Labour ranks, because there's a lot of respect.
It is, but he's got to think about everyone else, doesn't he, as well? He wants to appeal to... you know, the entirety of the electorate. Thank you very much indeed, Matthew Stalin. Always great to speak to you. Shall we go live to the southwest Iceland?
Yes, the southwest of Iceland is important here because a volcano is erupting again. This is the 5th outbreak since December. These are pictures that we can see now live from southwest Iceland, and it just shows that the majesty of nature here. I mean, my goodness me. There are, of course, knock-on effects from volcanic eruptions. They do contribute in a major way to CO2 in the atmosphere. This could have weather pattern implications. Also, do you remember back, was it 2010, 2011, when that Icelandic volcano practically prevented all air flight for about a week around October half-term?
And we were on this show talking about volcano erupting and people having to be moved away from their homes. The emergency services were working overtime to try and deal with it because these things happen so suddenly in Iceland. There's a lot of activity, isn't there, under the ground there?
Yes.
So there you go, amazing shots. We thought we'd bring them to you because they're quite incredible, the lava there.
No, really, really, well, it's a powerful, powerful eruption. More on that as we get it, of course, but stay with us. Much more to come. The party leaders are, of course, on that campaign trail. And is there a bit of politicking going on within the British Medical Association? That next.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
2,000 football banning orders have been issued to England fans ahead of this summer's Euro 2024 tournament in Germany. But authorities think that more than 300,000 England supporters could go to Germany, with Scotland fans, of course, also expected to travel in huge numbers. Well, I'm joined now by GBNews' home and security editor, Mark White. Mark, welcome to the show. So you went to a press briefing this morning. As I understand, the authorities are gearing up to tackle what they see as a huge wave of potential hooliganism at the tournament. What's the latest?
Well, they're certainly not saying they're expecting hooliganism, and they are preparing for the worst, of course, if it happens, but hoping for the best. They say that in recent tournaments, England fans and, of course, Scotland fans have been pretty well behaved, but there will be very significant numbers attending that tournament, which gets underway in just over 5 weeks' time. That first match is Scotland taking on Germany in Munich, and of course just 2 days later it's England against Serbia near Dortmund. So 300,000 England fans alone they're expecting, because it's so accessible. I spoke earlier to Chief Constable Mark Roberts, who is the national lead for football policing. This is what he told me.
Positive, you know, England fans got a great record at recent tournaments. We know when any number of that people travel, there's always potential for issues, but I think the German authorities are really well prepared. And I think one of the positives, particularly thinking about our fans, Germany's a beer drinking culture, so the police are well aware of dealing with people in the nighttime economy. They deal with plenty of big festivals, so I think we're going to a place that is well suited to work with us to keep everyone safe and make sure there's no issues.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 2:27.
2:28.
2:28, yes. Thank you for the correction, Tom.
Well, it just turned while I was talking.
Party leaders are back on the campaign trail today. Rishi Sunak met broadband apprentices in Cornwall. The Tories are announcing a plan to crack down on so-called Mickey Mouse degrees.
Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer and Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary, are in the West Midlands, promising to reduce NHS waiting lists to 18 weeks, but only within 5 years.
Yes, this comes as doctors announce they will go on strike again, just days before the general election. Health Secretary Victoria Atkins says doctors are putting strikes above patient safety.
Junior Doctors Committee have walked out of mediation. Let me just give a history. Last year, junior doctors received up to a 10.3% pay rise. I wanted to give them more. They walked out of those discussions in November, December time. They called more strikes. I kept talks going on quietly in the background to keep the channels of communication open. I finally entered mediation with them in the last couple of weeks, and they've now walked out of that mediation process, knowing full well that in the middle of a general election campaign, I do not have the freedom that I would otherwise have as a Secretary of State.
Oh, the Health Secretary there speaking from Alexandra Palace. Perhaps
Yes.
she was off to watch the darts or something.
In
ice
North
skating.
London. No one will know where Alexandra Palace is outside London.
Everyone knows the darts is at Alexandra Palace.
No. Well, anyway,
This
GB
is
News
not why I'm
presenter GB News presenter Gloria De Piero is with us now. Gloria, the timing of this strike action and the announcement, what do you make of it?
I don't think it's helpful for either of the parties, actually. But Wes Streeting, the person who wants to be our Health Secretary, has been really clear. If you think a 35% pay claim is a realistic pay claim, then forget it. It's not going to happen. Of course, no government could honour a pay claim like that, although maybe we should have a go here. What do you reckon? 35%?
Sounds like a good plan. Maybe we could all get to it. No, that's a bad idea. But Gloria, isn't this the point? There's going to be a strike days before a general election. When strikes happen, people tend to blame the government. That's how it works. It's likely to perhaps change the minds of some people who are voting. That's clearly why they've decided to do it at this time. And as the Health Secretary said, she can't respond because we're in an election period.
You know what I think is the most significant health announcement of today? It's not about the strike. It's about Wes Streeting and Keir Starmer holding that campaign event today and saying that 40,000 more appointments will be in our NHS every week within that first year of a Labour government. And if I can just take you back to what happened to the NHS under that last Labour government, it had record approval rating. 70% of people, this was, British Social Attitude Survey, independent, they liked their NHS. Now it's down to 21%.
It also had a lot more money, and one thing the Labour Party isn't saying they'll do is a lot more money. They're saying it will go up by about 1 billion. Well, it's gone up by 50 billion in the last 10 years.
And what that shows is that this government are not capable of running our NHS. And Wes Streeting has been really, really clear. It's not just about money. And he said today that in order to get those health waiting lists down, he's very happy to use the private sector, expand the use of the private sector. No ideology from the Labour Party, just a determination to
sounds so compelling.
We've done it before.
You've done it before with tens of billions of pounds. The NHS this year is running at a £3 billion deficit. What Wes Streeting is saying is that there'll be a minor tax rise to put in a tiny amount of money.
You might not think 40,000 extra NHS appointments a week is going to make a difference. I do. I think it'll make a massive difference to those people who are waiting and paying to get their
Gloria,
operation.
I take your point, but Wes Streeting, he's going to face exactly the same problems as the Conservative government. The BMA, they're not his fans. No. He's said himself that they can be hostile towards him. He's going to be asking them to work overtime at weekends.
Absolutely.
He's going to be, you know...
he should.
But he's going to face the same backlash, potentially, from the unions. I mean, the Labour Party may be closer to these unions, but the unions are saying they are going to continue to strike whoever is in government. And if he's not offering up that money...
And it is their right to strike now. Would I have a conversation with them? Absolutely. Can you perhaps... If you have a fallout, you know, if me and you had a fallout, we'd sit down and talk and try to find some sort of compromise to get things back on track. But where's this going to be no pushover? A Labour government will be no pushover.
Well, but isn't that the problem? We've seen waiting lists come down when there aren't strikes and go up when there are strikes. And if Wes is not going to give them 35%, there will be strikes.
Our NHS waiting times are what they are because of strikes. It's for the birds.
No, they shot up because of COVID. The idea is, do they marginally come down or marginally go up? And whenever there are strikes, they tick back up when they need to come down.
You can point to the COVID record. I will point to the last Labour government's record. And I'm... You know, the whole Labour Party is incredibly proud of that record. Nobody, you know, waiting longer than, I think it was like 95% or something, but hardly anybody waiting more than 18 weeks from diagnosis to
You did, of course,
treatment.
gold plate the contracts of GPs, many of whom then retired early, stopped working so many days. You poured so much money.
Hang on, and also in the meantime, the population has grown substantially.
You can have me back on to have a go at me if NHS is not better under Labour hands.
OK,
all right, deal?
That sounds like a fantastic deal. We'd love you on before then, if possible, as well, my goodness.
Yes, please. Gloria Di Piero, GB News presenter, thank you very much indeed.
Well, coming up, the Lib Dems are launching what they're calling a rescue plan for farmers as they campaign in Wales. But farming in Wales is a devolved issue. How do you work that one out? Let's get your headlines before all of that.
Good afternoon. The top stories at 2:34. Labour has not taken any decision to bar Diane Abbott from standing for the Labour Party. The MP reportedly told media that she'd been blocked from running with the party, but Sir Keir Starmer said this afternoon those reports were not true. She had the whip withdrawn in April last year following comments she made about racism. She later apologised and an investigation concluded in December. She was a close ally of former leader Jeremy Corbyn and served as his shadow Home Secretary. It's unclear whether she'll contest her seat in Hackney North and Stoke Newington. The Health Secretary is calling on the Labour Party to condemn strikes by junior doctors after another 5-day walkout was confirmed starting on the 27th of June. Victoria Atkins says that announcing the strike during an election proves that it's a political move and not about patients or staff. But the union says its demand for a 35% increase is only to make up for what it says is 15 years of below-inflation pay. Sir Keir Starmer has thrown his support behind the Welsh First Minister, who's facing a vote of no confidence after less than 3 months in office. The Welsh Conservatives tabled the motion against Labour's Vaughan Gething following months of controversy around donations during his election campaign. The vote is due to take place next week on the 5th of June. And a volcano in Iceland is erupting once again, the 5th time since December. And if you're watching us on television, you'll see it spewing lava and smoke. The outburst happened on the Reykjanes Peninsula, home to around 30,000 people just south of the capital, Reykjavik. Previous incidents had forced evacuations, closed key roads and even razed several houses in the Grindavik fishing town. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Sunshine and showers for most of us. Those showers are going to be most frequent in the east, particularly the northeast across parts of Scotland. That's where we're closer to this area of low pressure, so they could turn quite slow moving. And there is a weather front as well. So there's a thunderstorm warning in force for much of Scotland through today and into this evening as well. The showers could bring some localised flooding issues. So do take care if you're out and about across these areas of Scotland. Across many eastern areas as well, you're likely to see some heavy showers through the day, but they will move through a little quicker than further north. And in the west, it will be a fairly bright day, a bit of a brisk breeze, but temperatures climbing a little higher than they did yesterday. Highs of 20 degrees or 21 are possible in the far south. Should stay dry across the south for this evening, but it's across eastern Scotland where these heavy showers, thundery showers, will continue into this evening, well towards 10 or 11 o'clock possibly. And the heavy showers will continue into parts of northern England as well. Some showers across Northern Ireland. Further south and west, it will be a little bit drier, but you can't rule out the odd shower here and there. But I think across the south coast, it should be a fairly fine end to the day with temperatures still around 18 degrees. And it'll stay fairly dry through the first half of the night for many southern and central areas. But into the north, that's where those heavy showers are going to continue, particularly as they push into parts of northern England through this evening. And then showers breaking out across parts of Wales into parts of the southwest of England by tomorrow morning, possibly. So many areas are at risk of some showery outbreaks of quite heavy rain through this evening. And those bands will continue their journey southwards through tomorrow morning. So central areas of Wales and England could see some rain first thing. Further north, though, it does turn a little bit drier for some across western parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, western northern England as well. And it will be a drier and brighter day across the west generally on Thursday, but still in the east, there's further showers to come.
The latest GB News travel.
Hello to you, I'm Jules Buckley. Let's go to Glasgow firstly, where the westbound M8 is currently queues, indeed queues building at the turn for Charing Cross at 18. Traffic at a stand to sort a vehicle fire out. The earlier vehicle fire, southbound A74M is gone, but two lanes still combed off. That's from 16 to 17, that's Johnston Bridge, down toward Lockerbie North, just one lane open, slow going. A vehicle fire as well in Berkshire on the westbound M4. Again, two lanes combed off, slow going, Thiel at 12 to Chieveley Newbury 13. The New Haven Road, the A259 New Haven and East Sussex, that's shut at the moment between the Denton roundabout and Seaford and queuing for a collision. And the anti-clock M25 at the Dartford Tunnel, still queuing back to Swanley Junction 3 following an earlier breakdown. All the lanes are back open.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Right, well, good afternoon, Britain. And Martin Dubney is up next at 3 o'clock. He's joining us now. Martin, what have you got in store? How are you?
Well, following on from your excellent show, we'll of course be focusing on the Diane Abbott debacle. First she was out, now she's back in. It was meant to be about the NHS today. Once again, the hard left have hijacked Starmer's campaign trail. And with that, Diane Abbott, yet again, something doesn't quite add up. We'll also have the Prime Minister at 4:25. He'll be speaking live from the campaign trail, and we'll cross to RAF Scampton, of course, a story very close to the heart of GB News viewers. 2,000 asylum seekers were meant to be put onto that site. We'll have a crucial update from a councillor. There's been a breakthrough on that case, and I'm obsessed with his general election gaffes. Yesterday, Ed Davey took a tumble in Lake Windermere looking for floating voters. Today, David Cameron proved he's all froth and no substance, pouring the worst pint in Britain. And Ed Davey, he's at it again. He's on his bike. Did he take a tumble? Tune in and find out.
Marvellous stuff, Martin. Well, that's coming up at 3 p.m. We'll be watching.
He's getting better at his puns, isn't he? Getting better every day.
What doesn't add up about the Diane Abbott scandal? No, goodness
Searching
me.
for floating voters.
Yeah.
I liked that one. Anyway, the Liberal Democrats, as just mentioned, have launched their general election campaign in Wales today, promising to reverse what they're calling the Conservatives' legacy of failure in the target seat of Brecon and Radnor.
That will have sounded very odd to anyone listening on the radio.
Yes, he was doing
context,
a wheelie.
We saw Ed Davey just on a bike. But let's now get the very latest with the GB News political correspondent Olivia Utley, joining us live for the campaign trail in Bath with the Lib Dem battle bus behind her. What's up in Bath, Olivia?
Well, this is used to be the Lib Dem heartlands. Bath is still held by a Liberal Democrat MP, Vera Hobhouse, who is here today. But there are other seats around Bath and going into Devon and Cornwall, which the Lib Dems held up until 2015, but ended up losing. They fell like dominoes in the 2015 election after that disastrous coalition, disastrous for the Lib Dems, I mean, between David Cameron and Nick Clegg. The Lib Dems are really, really hoping that they can pick up a lot of those seats again, and they're doing that by prioritising sort of relatively niche issues which people on the ground actually care a lot about. They've been talking about the dentistry drought. This is an issue which concerns millions of people, particularly in rural areas in the southwest and in Wales. And they've been talking about pollution in rivers. That's why Davey was paddleboarding in Windermere yesterday. He wants to get sewage and pollution out of the rivers. The other thing which he's been focusing on today, particularly when he launched his Wales campaign this morning, is agriculture. He's promised this £1 billion of investment in agriculture. Now, if you actually look into the detail there, of course, agriculture is a devolved issue in Wales, so this £1 billion is really for England, but he was pretty evasive about that when he was speaking in Wales today. He has promised that this £1 billion would not be paid for by raising working people's taxes, but it isn't 100% clear how it would be paid for.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Olivia Ratley there, GB News, a political correspondent outside the Yellowhammer 1.
Yellowhammer 1. You know, the thing about Yellowhammer, isn't it? It's not just the Yellowhammer that the Lib Dems see themselves, the sort of colour yellow as a hammer in the blue wall. It's also the code name that the Treasury used for no-deal Brexit planning, which I'm sure is a fact that has not escaped the eyes of the Lib Dem planners who decided to have perhaps a subtle nod to Brexit.
And am I being very thick? I thought the Liberal Democrat colour was orange.
Orangey, yellowy, sort of, yeah, I think they get away with it.
OK, well, in other news, this is something that struck me this morning. Feeding young children peanuts in the form of a smooth spread, so I guess peanut butter, for safety could provide lasting protection from peanut allergies.
Well, that's according to a new study conducted by a team at King's College London. The study found that feeding large amounts of peanut butter to infants from weaning until the age of 5 could provide a lifelong allergy defence.
Now, it's a discovery that might come as a shock to some parents, and it's been widely understood to avoid peanuts completely in the early years due to the fear of allergies. But could actually avoiding peanuts for your children actually cause them to have the intolerance later on in their lives? So joining us now is consultant in allergy and immunology, Professor Gideon Lack. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us. Now, this is something that I always thought. I thought that if you don't introduce things like peanuts to a child very early on, they then go on to have difficulties with these foods. Have you proven that?
Yes, for many years we were advising parents not to feed their babies peanuts and other foods that cause allergies for a period of time. In fact, at one point it was official guidelines to avoid peanuts for the first year of life in high-risk babies. But we've changed our thinking, primarily on the basis of the original LEAP study, which we carried out and published in 2015. Just a note of clarification, we didn't give peanut butter to babies. We gave peanut butter or peanut puffs mixed with water or milk or pureed fruits so that there wouldn't be a risk of choking, of course. So one wouldn't give pure peanut butter to babies. But we were really agnostic as to what the outcome would be. And we enrolled 640 babies into this study at as early as 4 months of age. They had severe eczema. Half were given peanut products, half avoided peanuts till the age of 5. And we found at that point there was over an 80% reduction in peanut allergy. So almost complete prevention of peanut allergy at age 5 years. The question remained, would these children have to keep eating peanuts for life to remain protected? Or could they ad-lib? Could they eat peanuts where and when they like, how much, how little? So we followed these children for a further 7 years, actually from the age of 6 to the age of 13, as young adolescents. And we again evaluated the vast majority of the cohorts, the families, parents, children were incredibly dedicated, remained in this study, and we were able to evaluate this protective effect at 13 years of age. And the really dramatic news was that the protection persisted. In other words, this early intervention applied very early on. It decreased peanut allergy by more than 70%.
Well, Professor Gideon Lack, that is an extraordinary discovery and very, very good news that we're learning so much more about what is such a difficulty for so many families. Thank you so much for coming on and explaining all of that. Really remarkable stuff.
Yes, thank you very much, Professor Gideon Lack there. I mean, yeah, a lot of parents try to avoid anything to do with peanuts, and it looks like that's exactly the wrong thing to do. But coming up, are election gaffes a PR blunder? We'll be taking a look back at some of the best and the worst from campaigns gone by.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
So the UK's most popular baby names have been revealed, with Noah and Olivia again topping the annual list. In at number 2 is Mohammed for boys. List is on the screen here. Number 3 for boys is George. Then it goes Olivia. Then it's Leo, Arthur, and so on. And for girls, so Olivia is number 1. Then Amelia, Isla, Ava, Lily, Ivy, Freya. There we go. Any of those names take your pick? Where's Dawn, by the way?
Well, yeah, there's on the Telegraph website, right, there's a really good way linked into this where you can actually put your name into the search engine, and these are names from 2022, by the way, and it tells you how common your name was. And I did put Dawn in. It's never been that popular. Can't think why. And there were only 5 babies named Dawn in 2022.
Really? That's surprising.
It's not a full confession here, right? My middle name, Mum, I hate you, is Maureen. Why is everyone laughing? My middle name is Maureen, which is a good old-fashioned East End name, and that has completely died out. There were no babies named Maureen.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Names like Keith, for example, Peter. Would you call a baby these days Keith or Ian? Baby Ian?
Without a doubt. I feel like I'm in a persecuted minority, you see, because later on, when I'm watching the boxing with Terry, Steve, Mick, Phil and Kev, right, and Peter, there are no such names featuring in this list. We are dying out. Our names will soon be gone forever, and I feel victimised by it.
Likewise, I should think we should start a campaign group and go on a protest march through London.
Hans, what do you make about Mohammed being number 2 for boys' names?
You know, I'm not going to comment on people. You know, they're going to call what they want to call. What I find interesting is people that do double barrel because they can't decide, and you know, a lot of people do that, and that's a bit difficult because I think you should just pick a name. You know.
I tell you names that are falling down the list though: Harry and Meghan.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Right, it's 2:50. We're coming up to the end of the show, and Ed Davey, he's been kicking off the pre-election shenanigans with his paddleboarding incident yesterday, and it's got us thinking about all the gaffes that usually come with campaigning.
Yes, whether it's hanging from a zip line or falling gracefully into water, do politicians make a fool of themselves on the campaign trail deliberately?
Deliberately, yes. Let's take a look at some of the best ones from campaigns gone by.
I'm enjoying this, honestly.
Oh, politicians in the wild.
And if you were listening on the radio, I hope you enjoyed the music. But I have to say that there are some very, very funny ones, and there are some less funny ones. Of course, in the 2001 general election, John Prescott punched a voter. And that was for half of a day. You had a lot of people sort of worrying and wondering what on earth is the response going to be from the Labour machine. Yeah. And Tony Blair had this, I guess, apposite response in the end of it when he was asked at a press conference. John is John.
And we all remember Gordon Brown and his bigoted woman comment.
Duffy.
That was a hot mic, wasn't it?
It was. Who put me up for that?
Oh, that was bad. That was bad. That was very bad.
Yes, of course, a hot mic moment where he's left the microphone on his lapel, and I think it was Sky News. It was their microphone, and they managed to grab it. And
I think the Liberal Democrats are the best for the fun and harmless, but very much deliberate gaffes. I would say this man we're watching who dropped his trousers neck to Clegg. That's quite the scandal.
Quite the scandal. Like Neil Kinnock on a beach in Brighton, I think in 1987 for that conference, he fell over. But ultimately, do these actually matter in terms of how people see politicians?
I bet Mr. Whippy was still 99p back then.
Goodness me. People don't often think of politicians as normal people. We almost expect them to not be able to pour pints and to fall over and to fall into the water and just be a bit awkward. Do you think it actually affects our perception?
I think it can. I think it can. If someone is so horrendously awkward in the public, it does bring about that sort of out-of-touch narrative, doesn't it? I mean, the sandwich, Ed Miliband and the bacon sandwich, that felt rather out of touch.
Robotic way of communication. I suppose you do see it again and again. And then you get the politicians who are seen as perhaps being more normal. To be fair, the worst thing we could find about Tony Blair there was holding an ice cream, which perhaps says quite a bit.
There's a safety, though, isn't there, in holding back your personality, but sometimes a little bit of personality can go a long way. Anyway, that's it for today. We'll be back tomorrow with Good Afternoon Britain at midday.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. Sunshine and showers will continue this afternoon. They could turn quite heavy, particularly in the east, with a risk of thunderstorms. In the west, though, it is turning a little bit drier. That's as high pressure is slowly starting to build in from the west. But in the east, that's where low pressure's in charge. And where we're close to that area of low pressure, up to the eastern areas of Scotland, that's where the showers will be quite slow moving into this evening. So further impacts from the rain are possible overnight. And that rain is going to push southwards through the night, bringing a risk of some heavy showers into parts of Wales and northern England by tomorrow morning. Further south, though, it should stay fairly dry overnight, and it will be another mild start to the day, and fairly dry across the south first thing. So some early sunshine is possible here. We've got a northerly wind developing on Thursday, and so it will be a bit of a cooler day for most of us. And where we're more sheltered from that northerly wind across the central belt, southern areas of Scotland, there's a chance of some brightness first thing, especially across southeastern areas of Northern Ireland as well, but many areas will see a bit of a cloudy start to the day with some outbreaks of heavy rain possibly into parts of Wales, central areas of England, across the south coast as well. There could be some heavy showers breaking out first thing. So a mix of sunshine and showers once again on Thursday, but the showers will become much more focused across eastern areas where we're still close to this area of low pressure, bringing that more unsettled and cooler weather. But into the west, we start to see that drier and finer weather developing, and so it should be a fairly bright and dry afternoon for many western areas of the UK tomorrow. Temperatures are a little lower than today tomorrow, just into the mid to possibly high teens, but in the sunshine it will still feel pleasant enough. Now, through Thursday evening, rain will likely continue across eastern areas. Into the west, though, that dry and fine weather is developing, and that is the theme as we head towards the end of the week and the weekend, with more in the way of sunshine developing and temperatures rising towards the low 20s.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you can win a whopping £20,000 cash. And because it's totally tax-free, every single penny will be in your bank account to do whatever you like with. £20,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours this summer. Hurry, as lines close on Friday. You've got to be in it to win it. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Have government done enough, do you think, to actually help them out?
I think there will be occasions where people have tried to run a venture, whether it be a pub, a restaurant or anything sort of like that, in the hospitality sector, and it hasn't become commercially viable because of costs, because of bad accounting or because of bad business people. That is just a fact of life. That happens in every sector. So there will be pubs that are closing because they've been poorly run. But I do think there will be occasions where people are forced out of the market. So if local councils aren't being able to pass on business rates, for example, maybe central government can do more. It always tries to do more to cut beer duty and things like that to keep pubs going. So I don't think it's necessarily just as plain as what James is saying, is that, you know, bad pubs will just inevitably be falling by the wayside.
The idea that you two gentlemen, you raging capitalists, support the government stepping in to protect pubs seems to be particularly peculiar. If a pub isn't commercially viable, it has to be allowed to fail.
Well, Sadiq Khan, you know, he has a nighttime czar that